Yellow mga kainiks! Welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. And for you na first time ako makita, Yellow, I'm Dominic Alvarez and welcome to my unique interviews. So today is a very special day kasi every day naman is a very special day. Pero very special ngayon kasi we will have our very first unique guest na college professor. Pero mas prefer niya na tinatawag siyang teacher. So, very special yun kasi, di ba, basta sa akin, special talaga yung mga first. So, siya first college professor and hindi talaga kami as in personally magkakilala. So, mamaya tanongin natin sa paano ba talaga kami nagkilala. Tapos, once pa lang kami nag-meet, nung first time namin mag-meet, hindi, magkakilala kami, ano ba tawag doon? Ano tawag doon? Unique guest, yung acquaintance, ganun, acquaintance kami. Tapos yung first namin meeting, it lasted for 5 hours mga ka-uniques. Tapos nung first meeting na din yon, in-invite ko na siya as unique guest and he said yes. So, sobrang natutuwa ako sa support na nakukuha ko from my unique guests. Tapos, ay my God, shoutout to 1 million watcher. Wow, kakatuwa ka naman. Nasa 1 minute pa lang. Meron na tayong 1 million watcher guest. Ikaw ba yan? Guest? Baka another gadget yan, ha? Joke. So, anyway, this will be a very special guesting kasi how to save the world, mga kainik. So, di ba yung question, how to save the world, paano nga ba? And so yun, aalamin natin with our unique guest. And siya, kahit sobrang konting beses ko pa lang siya nakausap, ang napansin ko sa kanya is he loves studying and he loves teaching. Kaya nga gusto niya tinatawag siya na teacher. Tapos, ano pa ba yung mga about him? Sabi niya dito, kasi tinanong ko, Sir, paano niyo ba gusto ma-describe? So, check ko yung yung layout. Sabi niya, Kapampangan, teacher, voracious bibliophile, and cat person. Ano yung cat person? Tanongin natin siya, ano ba yung cat person? So, without further ado, let's welcome my unique guest, my very first college professor, Sir Christian Manaloto.
Maya pagbengin ng Diyos.
Ano ba? May pag ganun. Banging Diyos, Sir Christian. Ano yung cat person?
Well, a cat person. Yes, I'm an ailurophile.
Oh. Ano po? Anong tawag doon? Ano sinabi niyo term?
Go ahead.
Ano yung cat person? You are an ano yung first time ko narinig yun?
Ailurophile. It's from the Greek. Yes. Cat lover.
Ailurophile. Cat lover. Oh, may nasa 2 minutes pa lang tayo, may bago ako natutunan na term. Ailurophile. Okay yun na. Ailurophile. So yun, kamusta ka naman, sir? Saan ka galing? Galing ka ba sa labas? Or galing ka lang sa room mo? Saan ka galing?
Well, I don't know. I'm supporting all our medical frontliners, and I don't want to add to the cases. And actually, we've broken 10,000 new cases in the Philippines, so I'm staying home. And besides, it's Good Friday today. I was supposed to go biking earlier, but there wasn't enough time. So, yeah.
Very good ka, sir, na nagsistay ka at home kasi it's our way na mag-contribute in saving the lives, in saving the world, di ba? How to save the world.
Yes.
So, kinonect talaga sa title. Kasi, pag nagstay tayo outside, di ko alam saan ko nakita yung post na yun, na sa'yo ba yun, sir? Ikaw ba yung nag-post na pag nagstay, hindi ko alam saan ko na-check. Nagstay ka outside, parang na-invite mo yung other persons to stay outside. So, parang ganun din. Para din siyang virus. Ikaw nag-post na, sir?
I shared that tweet from one of my former colleagues at Ateneo. That when you post, you do something just to relieve your boredom, you go out, and you post that, and people start thinking, oh, maybe I should do my own. So you're actually, in a sense, encouraging them to go out rather than stay home.
Kaya
so
very
you don't have
good
to post about it.
If you go out, you don't have to post about it. Kasi na-invite nyo mga kainis yung others na to go out as well. Kasi syempre may inggit sila. And they will, post it then. So magiging siyang talagang domino effect. Nag-love shoutout to 2 million watchers. Wow, meron kang mga, abangers, Sir Christian. 2 million na yung watchers natin.
Yeah.
So, yun. Very good ka, sir, for staying at home. And very good din kami, yung family namin, kasi strict yung parents namin. They don't want us to
Mhm.
go out. So, yun, sir. Paano ba tayo nagkakilala? Sabi, ikwento mo sa mga kainiks, paano tayo nagkilala?
Well, it so happens we were both in the same school at Miriam College. I was a professor
Mm-mm.
there, and you were a student. You tended to keep to yourself, but since it's a very small school, it's easy to recognize when a student comes from Miriam College, especially in the college level. They're about less than 2,000, if I'm not mistaken. But then I found out about you from a schoolmate in Holy Family, who's a
Mm-mm.
CPA now, Mariel Pamintum. And she told me that you had been bullied. And so, wow. And
Mm-mm.
I don't know, that you were being bullied, I think, that time. So I sent you support by, I looked for
Wait
you
lang, sir,
on
let's
Facebook.
clarify. I was bullied in my high school, not in college. I love my college, mga kainiks. Okay, sir. So, go on.
Oh, okay. So, well, then she told me that you had been bullied in high school. And so I wanted
Mm-mm.
to reach out to you. So I looked for your profile on Facebook to send you a message on what is now Messenger. And then it turns out when I was looking for your profile, it turns out that it's a small world because you're the younger sister of a classmate of mine in the Ateneo. You're Ate
Mm-mm.
Tatiana.
Mm-mm.
So
Ah,
all the more.
it's
So
a
it's a
small
small
world
world. So
after
then,
all. Mm-mm.
yeah. And of course, how did I get invited to become your unique guest is when we talked a few weeks ago, and you ended up, becoming not just my servicing agent, but rather you were also able to help me get health insurance from Sun Life.
Mm-mm.
Okay, so mga ka-unique, kumako po kayo, kuha po kayo sa kanya ng insurance, especially nowadays,
Wow,
whether
thank you
you're
sa pag-plug,
single
sir.
or yeah, or whether you have dependents. Everybody needs health insurance, especially now in these days where you could easily get sick.
Mm. Kakatuwa ka, sir, kasi napansin mo yung yung unang mong pagka-describe sa akin is I was keeping to myself. Kasi kahit
Mm-hmm.
very small nung school natin, yung population sa Miriam College, ibig sabihin nun, very observant ka, no, sir? Kasi napapansin mo yung pati yung mga hindi nagsasalita. Kasi yung iba, pag hindi naman nagsasalita yung isang person, di naman nila maaalala. So, ang galing na
Mm-hmm.
mo, sir. Ang galing ng memory mo and ang galing na you pay attention to your surroundings. Thank you very much, sir, na napansin mo ako kahit di ako nagsasalita nun. Tapos, a brief background, which is na, alam mo naman na kasi you message me nga. Kasi sometimes I post nga na naalala ko kasi I was bullied talaga no high school. Na, thank you very much for making me feel my existence. Ngayon sasagot mo, sir, kasi importante yun na you make people feel that they exist. Ganon. So, kahit po pala hindi ako nagsasalita nun, na napansin niyo ako. So, thank you very much, sir. And thank you na nag-reach out kayo sa akin sa mga times na naaalala ko that I was bullied. Pero ang good news, sir, I got through it na last year. So, parang I decided na to
That's good.
forgive and not to label myself as a victim of bullying anymore. Ganon.
Yeah.
Tapos, yun nga, yung meeting namin, mga Kinix, kasi, tinransfer sa akin si Sir. Nag-love shoutout to my sister, Ate Tatiana. Tinransfer niya sa akin si Sir Christian. Kasi tinanong ni Ate Tatiana, sinong gusto maging advisor ni Sir Christian. Tapos,
Mm-hmm.
sabi ni Sir, ako daw. Pero, mga Kinix, alam nyo ba, originally, nag-decide ako before kasi mag-transfer si Ate Tatiana. Sabi niya, Nick, gusto mo ba ta-transferan kita ng client? Sabi ko, ayoko ng transferred client. Sabi ko sa sister ko kasi paminsan, kung sino pa yung transferred, yung hindi mo organic or original na client, sila pa yung demanding. So, ayoko na ako sa kanya. And then, after a few days, nag-chat yung ate ko, sabi niya, gusto ko daw na servicing advisor ni Sir Christian. So sabi ko, yes. Kagad ako ng yes. Pero originally nga, ayoko. Pero nung nalaman kong si Sir Christian, nag-yes ako agad. And nag-review kami nung Sun Life plan niya. Tapos, nag-propose ako ng health plan. And kumuha si Sir Christian. Tapos 5 hours kami nag-usap kasi ang dami na namin na pag-usapan, which led us to this guesting itong How to Save the World. Naalala mo ba, sir? Bakit How to Save the World yung title natin? Or paano kita
We were
na-invite as guest?
I think it was because we were talking about something about the violence that's going on in society and all that violence that
Mm-mm.
we see on the media. And somehow, I don't know, that was what came to my mind.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Ako naalala ko, sir, basta may topic tayo, certain topic, and then na-include ko si Momo. So sabi ko, si
Hmm.
Momo, nakakatakot si Momo. Takot na takot ako doon. Nakita mo na ba yun, sir, si Momo?
Yeah,
Oo. Ako
creepy.
natakot ako doon. Usually, mga kainigs, natutulog ako as in lights off. Pero, nung nakita ko si Mama, yung picture lang niya, naka-on yung ilaw ko. Siguro mga 1 week na naka-on. Tapos sabi ko kay sir, si Mama nga bigla na lang lumilitaw kay Peppa Pig, ganyan. So, parang walang choice yung mga bata. Makikita nila. Tapos alam ko, from there, may nasabi si sir na, blah, 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 blah. Tapos sabi ko, alam ko na sir, gagawin kitang unique guest. Kaya yung namin, Zoom client review, naging 5 hours kasi aside from Sun Life, mga kainigs, ang dami na namin nag-branch out na. Tapos sabi ko,
Hmm.
sir, last na to, ganyan. Huwag kayo naniniwala sa last ni Dominic Alvarez, hindi totoo yun. Tapos, ang dami na naging topic, naging yun nga, How to Save the World. So, bakit nga ba How to Save the World yung title, sir? Naalala mo ba?
Well, because since we've been talking about violence, one of the stories that is assumed by the media, by the movies, the stories
Mm-mm.
that we watch, is the term that one of the theologians that I am reading uses is the myth of
Mm-mm.
redemptive violence. In other
Mm-mm.
words, violence saves. So, but what are we saving? Then we're trying to save the world, or at least
Mm-mm.
humanity. So and I think you were the one who came up with that title, "How to Save the World."
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. Strength ko po kasi pag-iisip-isip ng titles.
Mhm.
So, yan. So, wag na natin patagalin pa. Excited na ako matutunan tong How to Save the World ni Sir Christian. Yan? The Myth of Redemptive Violence. So, Sir Christian, take
Violence.
it away.
Okay. Maya pabengi ng Diyos, salangita mo po. Come join us, lighten our ano. So I'm going to present to you a topic. This was supposed to be part of my dissertation in theology. So maybe you can begin. So
I-show na natin, sir, yung diba? May pa-PowerPoint pa to,
sure.
sir.
Okay. So
Ano yan, sir? Alibata ba yan? Yung red, di ba
let's hope
alibata yan?
the internet connection cooperates. There you go. So all right, let's begin. So how do we save the world? But normally when I have class, uh, I usually define the terms first before we
Okay.
proceed. So the two terms would be salvation, okay, and the word save. Anyway, so what is salvation? So this is the question. So what does it mean to save? So that's the one of the questions that we will be asking. So let's look at the word salvation. Okay, so the word salvation comes from the late Latin word salvare, which means to save, from the Latin salvus, which means safe. Okay, so these are just some
Mm.
possible definitions. Okay, so from different dictionaries online, preservation or deliverance from harm, ruin, or loss, a way of being saved from danger, loss, or harm, the act of
Mm-mm.
saving someone or something from harm, destruction, or an unpleasant situation. Or for my favorite dictionary, Merriam-Webster, it could also mean preservation from destruction or failure, or deliverance from danger or difficulty. Now, salvation is often a term that you will encounter in religious circles. So, according to the Encyclopedia Britannica, salvation in religion is the deliverance of humankind from such fundamentally negative or disabling conditions, like suffering, evil, finitude, and death. Well, it's not yet appearing on the screen.
Hindi, nag-appear na po sa
Yeah.
akin.
Okay, sige. Anyway,
Mm-mm.
so let's look at the verb to save. Okay, so these are some definitions again. So to save means to keep safe or rescue someone or something from harm or danger, to make or keep someone or something safe from danger or harm, or to bring back something to a satisfactory condition. It can also
Ang
mean to
ganda
help
po
something or
nun.
someone avoid harm.
Ang
Yeah.
ganda nung to bring back something from a satisfactory condition. Ang ganda nun.
Mm-hmm.
Kasi 'di ba
Actually,
sir,
that's why I included
for
it. That's from. Mm,
for example, itong
go
pop
ahead.
socket ko, yung holder ko ng sa phone, kapag ito natanggal na yung
Mm-hmm.
design niya, yung lollipop, tatanggalin ko na siya. Tatapon ko na. Bibili na ako ng
Mm-hmm.
bago. Pero actually, gumagana pa yung pop socket. So, ibig sabihin,
Mm-hmm.
hanggat gumagana pa, yun dun sa to bring back to satisfactory condition, hindi mo siya itatapon, i-restore mo siya. Tama?
Yes. Yes.
Gusto ko yun.
And later
Nice
on,
yun.
that definition is going to be of service to us. Okay. Now, from my favorite dictionary, the Merriam-Webster dictionary, two very important definitions of to save is to rescue or deliver from danger or harm, to preserve or guard from injury, destruction, or loss. But in addition, it also says that to save may further imply a preserving or maintaining for, as we said earlier, usefulness or continued existence. So, if we try to summarize all of these definitions together, this is what we can draw. To save means to help someone or something avoid danger, harm, injury, destruction, loss, or some other unpleasant situation. It may imply a preserving or maintaining for continued existence and or usefulness. But as you love to hear, Nick, it can also mean bringing something back to a satisfactory condition. So that's what we mean by saving. So, of course, our question is how to save the world, right? So, but before we even go answer that question of how to save the world, I think it's even more important to ask a more important and basic question. Okay, before you even want to save the world, you have to ask, is the world worth saving?
Oo
Okay,
nga naman. Tama. Iniisip mo how to save the world,
right.
pero first question talaga, is the world worth saving? Okay.
Exactly. So let's try to find an answer to that. Is the world worth saving? So, by the term world, we are not limiting ourselves only to humanity, but we include all other living beings, okay? As well as
Gusto
this
ko yung
beautiful planet.
beings. Gusto ko yung pagkaka-emphasize mo doon, sir. Beings. Nice yun. You
Well,
didn't
there's
use
a
living
reason behind
things.
that.
Oo.
Yes. Actually, I realized that we've been conditioned by our English teachers to refer to other living beings or creatures, okay? Creatures implying that they are created as things, but they are not things, they are not objects. And I don't know,
Tama.
I realized that it's a very scientific way of looking at things. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but science has tended to condition us to treat other living beings that are not human as objects, as more like
Tama.
machines
Tama.
that
Dapat
have
hindi
life.
sila
When we use it,
dapat hindi sila
yeah,
tawagan na things.
uh,
Dapat nga beings.
exactly.
Tama.
So
Tama ka,
when we
sir.
keep calling them living things, it's like we're also encouraging that kind of idea. This sort of reminds me of that time when I was a pre-med. I took up BS psychology,
Talaga? Nag-pre-med ka pala,
and
sir?
yes, I was supposed to become a medical doctor, but it never.
Mm.
I decided at the end of fourth year that I didn't want to study anymore and that I wanted to work.
Okay.
But look at me now; I'm still
Okay.
studying.
Okay
Anyway,
lang yun, sir.
so
Life is a study. Okay. Continue
yeah, we
study.
should be all lifelong learners.
Yeah.
Anyway, so part of the courses that we would be taking in pre-med would require us to dissect frogs. I don't know if you've ever encountered the chance, if you ever had the chance to dissect a frog.
Hindi ko na-experience yun. Anyway, sir.
Well,
Sige.
when you dissect a frog, you're making that frog, surrender its life in the name of science. It makes it's a living sacrifice. So how do you
Mm-mm.
dissect a frog? Sorry, this is not connected, but first you have to put the frog to sleep. You get chloroform. It's a chemical. You
Okay.
can also see this in movies when they
Yung
put this
ginaganon lang.
handkerchief, yeah, to
Mas
cover the mouth,
makakatulog.
and when
Okay.
you yes, you'll end up falling asleep when you breathe in that. No? So that's what you
Mm-mm.
do. You get some chloroform on a
Mm-mm.
cotton on cotton, and then you place it on the nostrils of the frog until the frog falls asleep. Well, yeah, or becomes
Mm-mm.
unconscious. Then you crucify the frog on a board using pins. Okay, so it's
Mm-mm.
like that. Then once
Mm-mm.
it's fastened to the board, crucified properly, you'll get your scalpel, and then you're going to create an eye incision. Okay, or an eight, like an
Mm-mm.
H, a side word H. And then once you've done that with your scalpel on the belly of the frog, you open the two flaps that are produced by your cutting with the scalpel, and you will see there the lungs expanding and contracting,
Mm-mm.
as well as the heart pumping of the frog's heart
Mm-mm.
pumping. So it really looks like
Mm-mm.
a machine, but you know it's alive. But you tend to treat it more like a machine. So poor frog.
Mm-mm.
At the same time, when we treat other living beings, whether they're animals or plants, as things, you become, I don't know, you become disrespectful that these have life, that they have a
Mm-mm.
spirit.
Mm-mm nga.
Okay, and sorry, this sort of reminds me, I'm part of, I don't know, I wouldn't say I'm part, but I'm concerned about this particular issue that's occurring here in Angeles City. You can look for this on social media, hashtag friendship259, hashtag save the trees. um,
Ano po yun?
there are these, yeah,
Ano
there are
yun?
these
Ano yun ha?
259
259?
trees. Yes,
Okay.
hashtag friendship 259. Uh,
Okay.
there,
Hashtag
there are
friendship 259.
these, yes, hashtag friendship 259, hashtag save the trees. There are these
Mm.
259 trees right
Mm-mm.
beside Phil-American Friendship Highway. Phil-American Friendship Highway is this circumferential road that connects MacArthur
Mm-mm.
Highway in Telebastagan, San Fernando to the perimeter
Mm-mm.
road of Clark Field. So,
Mm-mm.
and
Mm-mm.
what the DPWH is planning to do is to cut these 259 trees to supposedly for road widening, but what actually happens is, they're just creating more parking
Hala!
space.
Lalo tayong
Yes.
magkaka-flood niyan. Kasi 'di ba
Not just,
nakakatulong yung trees for the for the flood.
yes,
Tsaka
and
yung sa the,
pollution, air pollution,
the air that we breathe.
reducing, yes, reducing
Mm-mm.
the carbon dioxide, that is greenhouse gas.
Mm-mm.
But more than just that, I mean, from a
Mm-mm.
practical point of view, more than all these things that trees do to help us
Mm-mm.
live sustainable
Mm-mm.
lives. Well, if you drive or ride a bike or a motorcycle and you pass through there, it's so nice because there's this shade, ating salilong,
Mm-mm.
that they
Oo nga,
provide, no? And
tama.
when
Mm-mm.
you take these away, it's gonna be hotter. I mean, this has been happening along
Yeah.
MacArthur Highway going to San Fernando, and you know how hot it
Mm-mm.
is, especially all these concrete that's
Mm-mm.
being placed there. So
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
yeah, so I don't know. For me, it's very important to treat the environment, nature, our fellow living beings with respect, and not just our fellow living beings, whether animals or plants, because it's sad with those trees, especially. They can't talk and they can't move like we do, and so people think they're
Mm-mm.
just
Mm-mm nga.
things. So that's why I think there were
Yeah.
certain artists who painted white human stick figures on the bark of these trees, perhaps to somehow
Mm-mm.
give them the idea they're alive, to sort of humanize them, and
Mm-mm.
so that they're not just things that are in the way, but rather
Mm-mm.
they're living, breathing human beings. Okay.
Mm. Nice ano yun nice interpretation yun, sir. Kasi ako naman, ang alam ko dun sa mga sticks na, stick, yung drawing ng mga sticks is,
Mm-hmm.
para, ma-lessen yung mga accidents. Kasi, di ba yung mga trees, yung mga branches niya, brown, dark brown, ganyan. So, if you're driving, siya, hindi mo makikita. So,
Dark,
kaya nagkaroon
yes.
ng mga drawing ng mga tao doon. So,
Mm.
yun ang alam ko. Yun ang alam ko na, interpretation doon sa drawing. Kaya parang it
I see.
reminds me, yung kinikwento mo ngayon sa akin na yung mga drawing ng sticks na, human sticks is para sabihin na parang tao din sila, they have life.
They're alive, yes.
Diba? They are alive.
Yes.
Tapos yung alive, yung sa akin naman, para naman, ang nalaman kong story doon is malaman ng mga tao na, wait lang, may puno dyan. Which reminds me of religion, na parang we have different talaga interpretation, 'di ba? Sa things. Kaya
Yeah.
ang dami-daming dami-daming religion. So doon pa lang sa trees pa lang mga kainigs, makikita mo na we are subject talaga to our own interpretations and doon sa mga nasasagap natin na balita from other people. Kasi pares
Mhm.
namang tama eh. Pares naman tama yung sinabi namin ni Sir. Yung sa kanya, trees are like people, they have life. Yung sa akin naman, ang nabalitaan ko is kaya may mga drawings ng mga tao doon para makita na may trees doon. Kasi na-lessen yung accident, Sir. Because of yung mga drawings ng
Yeah.
tao. Kayo mga kainigs, ano bang take niyo doon sa mga trees na may mga drawing ng tao? So, nag-love shoutout to 3 million watchers. Yun. Yun, Sir, ang aking take doon sa sa
Well,
mga
so we're talking about interpretations, and I think you sort of mentioned religion. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm an expert on religion, but religion is actually, well, it's a way of interpreting experiences, spiritual
tama.
experiences, especially. And I don't know, religions are like, I don't know, this is one of my favorite stories when I teach theology. I don't know if you've heard of the story of the 6 blind men who encountered an elephant.
Not yet, sir. Ano yun?
Okay,
Ano
so
Ngayon ko lang
let me tell
narinig.
the story. So there are these 6 blind men, and it's their first time to encounter an elephant. So one of the blind men approaches the elephant and touches the elephant, and then says, "Oh, now I know what an elephant is. The elephant is very much like a snake." The second blind man approaches the elephant, touches the elephant, and then says, "Oh no, you're wrong. The elephant is not like a snake at all. The elephant is very much like a spear." Okay. So the third blind man approaches the elephant, then touches the elephant and says, "Oh no, no, you're both wrong. The elephant is very much like a fan." Okay. So then the fourth blind man approaches the elephant, touches the elephant and says, "No, no, no, you three are wrong. The elephant is very much like a tree trunk." Okay. Then the fifth blind man comes to the elephant, touches the elephant and says, "Oh no, all of you are wrong. The elephant is very much like a wall." Then the sixth blind man approaches the elephant and then touches the elephant and says, "Oh no, 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 you are all wrong. The elephant is very much like a rope." So now, if you look at it, well, we're not blind. We can see how they're touching the elephant. If you look at it, each one of them is correctly describing his experience of the elephant. Okay, touching the trunk, touching the tusk, touching the ear, the leg, the side, and the tail of the elephant. They're correctly describing their respective experiences. But in the same way that they're correctly describing their experiences, they are all wrong in trying to describe the entirety of the elephant. And probably you could say that to a certain extent, all of the religions have something useful in that they are all expressions of individuals, okay, of their experience of the divine, of the supernatural, of what most people call God or gods. But at the same time, it doesn't really capture all of it, because after all, as Saint Thomas Aquinas, one of the greatest theologians of the Roman Catholic Church, said, "We cannot know what God is. We can only know what God is not." Anyway, so
which reminds me, sir, ewan ko kung saan ko dito narinig na comprehending God is like an ant comprehending the internet. So, yun. Kaya dapat talaga, sir, di ba, we have to be respectful sa mga beliefs din ng other people, whether believers or non-believers, kasi ang tendency ng others, especially mga super hyper pa sa belief nila, is they tend to correct others na different from their beliefs. But in fact, we don't know the totality of God. It's like the 6 blind men na dinidescribe yung experience nila of the elephant. They missed out the whole elephant. So, yun.
yes.
Mga kainigs, reminder lang to #respect other people's beliefs. Kaya nilagay ko dun sa invitation ko for this How to Save the World is for Christians and non-Christians. So yun, let's
Mhm.
proceed. Nang ganda nung natutunan ko na sex
Okay.
blind men, saka
So,
yung meron tayong first commenter. Nag-love shoutout to my sister, Ate
hi,
Tatiana
Tati.
Cheryl Alvarez Castro. Ayan. Thank you very much,
Maya Pabengi.
Te, sa pag-visit. Tapos si Ate Tatiana, ang original advisor ni Sir Christian, and Sir Christian was transferred to me. And dahil doon, Te, sa very first naming meeting, na-invite ko siya as guest, Ate Tatiana. Tapos 5 hours kami nag-usap. May 5 hours kami usap. Tapos, di ba, sir, may teach ka pa nun, may tuturo ka pa nun nung the next day na, di ba? May
Yeah.
work ka pa. Oo. Tapos
Yep.
sabi ko, babay na, sir, ganyan. Tapos, nahirapan kami magbabay kasi sobrang, pares kaming, introverts, kaming dalawa ni Sir Christian. Pati sa atin, tatsa ng introvert. So, pag nag-uusap yung mga ganyan, yung mga introverts, ayaw na nilang maghiwa-hiwalay kasi yung mga ideas non-stop. So, yun. Magalap shoutout to Rensley Narciso. Mayap Abengi po. Mayap
Hi,
Abengi
Rensley.
po.
Okay.
So, tuloy na natin
Yes po.
ang ating topic. Ang ating
Okay.
unique guest is may PowerPoint presentation. Hindi naman po siya masyadong prepared.
So, as I was saying,
Ayan.
we're trying to save the world. We're not only talking about humanity. We're not only talking about living beings, animals, and plants. We're also talking about our beautiful planet, our in Kapampangan, Indong Tibuan, the
Indong
mother that gave
Tibuan.
birth to us, or the mother from which we sprung or grew up from.
May
Our
kurang
beautiful
narinig yan na
planet, our Indong Tibuan.
Indong Tibuan. Okay.
Tibuan. Root word is Indu, mother, tubu, which is to grow. Okay.
Okay.
Our Indong Tibuan, which is our common home. Okay. So anyway, so we're still trying to answer, is the world worth saving? So there are many answers. Okay. So you have the existential nihilists or nihilists, those who believe that ultimately nothingness prevails and that the world is meaningless. So they probably say it's not worth saving. Yeah.
Bakit meaningless?
And they're also, well,
Bakit
that's
meaningless for
because
them?
okay, existential nihilists are existentialists, and as existentialists, their basic philosophy or understanding of the world and human life is that there is no objective meaning out there, and that it is we who create our meanings. But in the end, since we all create our respective meanings, they are also free to interpret that, in particular the nihilists, to say that there is no meaning in the world. So if there's no meaning in the world, why bother saving it, right? So you just go through your life and you create meaning out of it, but in the end, it's not worth saving.
Okay.
So there are
Ang lungkot
also
naman.
certain
Ang lungkot
religious,
naman ng
yeah,
ng nihilists.
yeah, but there are people like that. So well, and again, I just have to respect their. But for all you know, just because they're nihilists doesn't mean that they're not trying to do good. Okay, so and that they're not looking for what is good. So that's how they find meaning in the world. Then there are those religious ideologies, Eastern, Oriental, Dharmic. To name some, you would have, of course, Hindu Dharma, or sometimes known as Hinduism, these family religions. And it's, you could say, younger sister, Buddhist Dharma, or what is also known as Buddhism. And these ideologies tend to discourage people from becoming too attached to the material world. Why? Because the material world is passing, it's illusory, it's impermanent, it doesn't last. So don't cling to it. And it's only going to make you happy if you cling to it. So that's what they would also say. Okay? So don't bother. There's more to life than just the material world. And there's also a local religious organization, which I will not mention. I don't want to offend them. But they claim that the world, and they refer to the world as Sanlibutan. For those who know, I think you know who I'm referring to. They would claim that the world, the Sanlibutan, and all who belong to it are doomed and ultimately destined for destruction in the lake of fire. So, in other words, if you think that the world
all
is...
are doomed.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're
Scary.
not part of their organization, you're part of the world, the sanlibutan. And the sanlibutan will end up in the dagatang apoy, or what in the book of Revelation
Mm.
refers to as the lake of fire. So if the world is
Mm-mm.
going there, so why bother saving it, right? So anyway,
Mm-mm.
these are some answers, but I don't know. Is the world worth saving? Let's look at what the Judeo-Christian Bible, what Christians refer to as the Old and New Testaments. What does it say? So the Judeo-Christian Bible talks about God creating a new heavens and a new earth. You'll find this in the book of the prophet Isaiah, the second letter of the Apostle Peter, and the book of Revelation. So a new heavens and a new earth. Um,
Mm-mm.
so anyway, what does that mean? Um, is it worth saving? So why bother? God is going to create a new heavens and a new earth anyway. So why save this one? Anyway, the Roman Catholic Church, in its Second Vatican Council, held in uh, the mid 60s, they have this document known as the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World. Its Latin title is Gaudium et Spes. This is what they have to say: the expectation of a new earth must not weaken, but rather stimulate our concern for cultivating and preserving this earth. So, what does that mean? So, just because God is going to create a new earth doesn't mean that we should, make a mess of the earth that's already here. But rather, it
Mm-mm.
should actually make us strive to keep and preserve, to, make the best of this one. Okay, and this is what the bishops, sorry, noisy. This is what the
It's
bishops of
okay.
the Second Vatican Council
Mm-mm.
are trying to say. Now, at the same time, sorry, we're going to celebrate the resurrection soon on Sunday, okay? And
Mm-mm.
in the
Easter
resurrection,
Sunday.
yes, on Easter Sunday, I actually, based on my own theological reflection, there's something that I realized. Um, we know that, of course, today we celebrate the birth of Jesus on the cross. We know that Jesus' body was broken, okay, when he was
Mm-mm.
crucified. Or even before he was
Mm-mm.
crucified, he was scourged. They did so many bad things to his body, and then he dies. Okay, but when he resurrects, normally they don't recognize him because, of course, they have never encountered anyone who's come back from the dead. But then, what Jesus would normally do when he appears to his followers after his resurrection is that he will show them his hands
Mm-mm.
and his side. And of course,
Mm-mm.
that incident in the Gospel according to John, where Thomas, who was not there
Mm.
in one of the
Doubting
appearances,
Thomas.
yes, doesn't believe unless I put my fingers through the nail marks in his hands and in his side, I will not believe. But
Yeah, to cease to believe.
so yes, which is not wrong, okay? But when
Mm-mm.
Jesus does appear, he shows them that. He says, "Come, come, see." So what's my point here? Jesus showed
Mm-mm.
his followers that it is really me. You've seen this body mangled on the cross. This is
Mm-mm.
really me. So, what's my point here? If Jesus, who is the new Adam, the first human being in the new humanity that God is trying to create, who is trying to create the same God who's creating a new heavens and a new earth, and has already provided a new Adam, the new in Jesus, could it be possible that in the world to come, the so called new heavens and new earth, could it be possible that this new heavens and a new earth is actually just like the body of Jesus? Could it be that this new heavens and new earth is the
Mm.
same world that we have, except that it is now
Okay.
redeemed and never to be destroyed again, the
Oh,
same way that Jesus will never die again?
makes sense. Ang galing, sir.
So,
Mm-mm.
maybe that's why we should save this world, the planet, the plants and
Mm-mm.
animals, as well as the
Mm-mm.
humanity. So, is the world worth saving? I think so. So, this brings us then to the next question. Okay, so who can save the world? Okay, so anyway, who can save the world? So, first, the world, our planet, is a living organism. And like a living organism, it tries to maintain a delicate balance, striving to maintain what
Mm-mm.
in Greek is known as homeostasis, this process by
Mm-mm.
which we try to, preserve the equilibrium. And aside from having this delicate balance, this world, this planet, also has the ability to heal itself over time. Okay. In fact,
Ang
here's
ganda
my
nun, sir,
theory.
yung ano, the
But anyway,
ability to heal itself. Ang ganda nun. I like that.
actually, the planet does heal itself, except that with all the damage that we human beings,
Mm-mm.
this ever increasing human population that's like an amag on the planet,
Mm.
okay, or
Mm-mm.
as I think it's in the Matrix, that we are like a virus upon the Earth. Could
Mm-mm.
it be possible that the Earth is trying to heal itself from the infection, the human infection
Mm-mm.
on its surface,
Mm.
with all these plagues that are going on with
Mm-mm.
this global warming? Uh, could it be that the Earth is suffering from a fever because it has an infection? Maybe it is.
Mm-mm.
So
Makes sense, sir. Kasi yun
who
nung
can
sinabi
save?
mong human infection. Kasi di ba may mga movies na
Mm-hmm.
na I forgot the
Yeah.
titles, pero there are many movies na tayo yung kinoconsider na virus. So parang tayo yung
Mm-hmm.
kinoconsider na infection kasi tayo yung destroy ng sad. Kasi yung mga humans, they are the ones destroying the earth.
Yes.
Yung,
So
so,
who then can save the world? I think it is we, the same human beings, who are, damaging the world, hurting the world. We are also the ones who can save the world. And if I may share
tama.
what Pope Francis, in one of his encyclical letters, entitled Laudato Si, he says, this
Mm.
sister, Mother Earth, now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible
Mm-mm.
use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her. We have
Mm-mm.
come to see ourselves as her lords and masters, okay? Entitled to plunder her at will. We are no longer children of the earth, but we are now lords and masters. And the violence present in our hearts is also reflected in the symptoms of sickness, the sickness of the
Mm-mm.
earth, evident in the soil, in the water, in the air, and in all
Mm-mm.
forms of life. Okay, so
Mm-mm.
violence. We have done violence to our Mother Earth. And he
Sad.
continues, yes, the urgent challenge to protect our common home, our indung tibuan, includes concern to bring the whole human family together to seek a sustainable and integral development. For we know that things can change. Humanity still has the ability to work together in building our common home. So, what is Pope Francis saying here? We, humanity, who are children of the earth, have caused damage to Mother Earth. But it is also the same
Mm-mm.
humanity united together who can change and save this world.
Mm-mm.
Okay?
Tama.
So, anyway, what kind of people can save the world? So, let me share something here from
Mm-mm.
uh, Brian McLaren from his book Finding Our Way Again. He says, if your goal is to produce firefighters and rescue workers, you have to produce people willing to enter burning buildings. They do this
Mm-mm.
not because they love fire, but because they hate it, and they despise the damage it causes people and their dreams. Their hatred of
Mm-mm.
fire and their love of safety draws them toward fire and danger. Wait, there's more. He uses another analogy, which is appropriate to our time. If your goal is to produce doctors and healthcare workers, you have to produce people willing to get close to disease. They do this
Mm-mm.
not because they love disease, but because they hate it and they despise the damage that disease can do to people and their dreams. We see that now. Their hatred of disease and their love of health draws them close to sickness, seeking to understand it in order to treat it.
Tama.
So,
Ang galing nung nagsulat niyan, sir.
this is Brian
Mm-mm.
McLaren.
Like,
I'll show you his picture in a
mm-mm.
while. Okay, so he says, consider a social worker who works with violent teen offenders. She hates violence. She despises what it does to people and their dreams. She devotes her life, even risks her life, for the cause of peace and to fight against violence.
Mm-mm.
She isn't drawn to violence the way a gangster is, nor does she run from it like a coward might. She is drawn toward the very thing she hates in order to stop it. Okay, so
Mm.
I'll show you Brian McLaren
Ang ganda.
finishing what he says. If a healed and healthy earth is your destination, the way to that goal promotes involvement, engagement, risk, and participation. However,
Mm-mm.
if the earth is a lost cause to you, then you will abandon this life and world for the afterlife. Brian McLaren.
Ano, if the earth is a lost cause to you, then you will abandon this life and world for the afterlife.
Mhm.
Please elaborate, sir.
Um, Well, it's like this. As I was saying, there are certain people who believe that the world is not saving. And if these people
Mm-mm.
believe that there is a world to come,
Mm-mm.
heaven, okay, a disembodied place where you can, go. So why
Mm-mm.
bother with this earth? There's an afterlife to look forward to. So don't care about this world anymore. But if you do
Mm-mm.
care about the earth, a healed and healthy one, then, like as I was saying, that a new heavens and a new
Mm-mm.
earth should stimulate us to take care of this one, then that means we need to get involved. We need to be engaged.
Mm-mm.
We need
Tama.
to risk ourselves and we need to participate to save the
Tama.
world.
Tama. Ang ganda ng mga sinulat ni anong name niya, Sir
Brian
Brian?
McLaren.
Si Sir Brian
Yes.
McLaren. Yun
Brian
dun sa,
McLaren.
Brian McLaren, yun. Yun dun
Uh,
sa mga, like, yung mga doctors, they
yes.
don't love the disease, they hate it, pero they go
Mm-hmm.
towards it. Tapos yun dun sa firefighters, they don't love the
Yes.
fire, pero they go towards fire, ganun. Ang ganda! Ang ganda, you go towards that something that you hate kasi you want it to stop na. Ang ganda.
Yes.
Ang galing, mga
Yeah. Brian
heroes
McLaren
natin
is a
sila.
public theologian in the United States. And he writes very,
Mm.
very well.
Dadagdag ko siya sa mga babasahin ko, sir, si Brian McLaren. Love
Yes.
ko na siya.
So, who then can save the world? As we've illustrated, only someone with compassion can
Mm-mm.
and would want to save the world. And what do we mean
Mm-mm.
by compassion? So, compassion is the sympathetic consciousness of the distress of others, coupled with the desire to alleviate that distress. And this implies pity coupled with an urgent desire to aid or help or to spare.
Mm-mm.
And in fact, compassion can refer to both the feeling, okay, and to the action that stems from that
Mm-mm.
feeling.
Gusto ko yon. The feeling and the action. Kasi iba na, they just get trapped with the feeling alone. So, dapat magkasama yun, feeling and the action. Tama
Action.
yan.
Right.
Kasi kung nafe-feel mo lang naman na naaawa ka sa world, ganyan, tapos you're not doing anything about it, so nonsense din yung feeling if we're not doing any action towards what we
Yes.
feel. Sir, which
Yes.
reminds me, very good ako. Very good ko yung sarili ko, top ko. Kasi, meron akong, certain, as in trauma from the past na sobrang nakalimutan ko na.
Mm-hmm.
Malalaman niyo siya sa My
Mhm.
Body Is Mine Again na live streaming. Si Chess Chua yung
Okay.
yung guest ko, unique guest ko, so taga Miriam din. Kasi it's, trauma
Yeah,
ko
Chess
siya
was my student.
before. Oh, okay. So, sobrang very good po siya. Ang galing din niya. Nagmana po sa inyo. So, yan, meron po akong trauma, tapos hindi ko alam paano siya i-handle. So, nag-blip yung utak ko. Nakalimutan ko siya. Kasi hindi ko siya alam i-handle. Tapos, naalala ko siya this 2020. Or, 2020 tama. Because of the quarantine. Kasi hindi nga kami pinapalabas nung parents
Yes.
namin sa bahay. So, ang dami kong naalalang mga pinalimutan ko na, ganon. Tapos, ang na-realize ko dun is hindi mo pala ma-skip ang isang bagay. Dapat talaga isosolve at isosolve mo siya. So, nung na-feel ko na yon yung certain sadness, ganyan, nagkaroon din ako ng anger, anxiety, ganon, depression, it then stop there na. Kasi, nag-take action ako. Yun, nagandaan ako dun sa sinabi mo na hindi lang siya dapat nag-stop sa feeling kasi dapat nag-take action ka. So, yun. Let's take action, mga Phoenix. Kasi, big help tayo sa society and basta dito sa how to save the world. Yun.
And that's exactly why it's called emotion. Emotion is something that moves you to action.
Naalala ko si Tony Robbins, sinabi nga din niya yan. Very good din, sir. Thank you very much sa pag-remind sa akin ng emotion moves us to action. Kaso, di ba, sir, may, merong, pag may nangyayari sa'yo, may tatlong, yung mangyayari, which is nangyari sa akin before, yung freeze, i-educate mga sila, sir. Dun sa,
We'll get to that in a while. We'll get to that,
sige.
those responses
Sige.
to trauma.
Sige.
Okay? So anyway, which brings us to that question. So we were saying that if you are trying to save, it's always trying to save something or someone from something else, okay? Or saving something for. But then, what are we saving the world from? Okay? So Well, there's many things. You have the global climate crisis, and of course, you're trying to save them from human beings and their seemingly innate
Mm-mm.
violence. Uh,
Mm-mm.
and I think this innate violence springs from this belief known as the myth of scarcity. Okay,
Yung kulang.
the myth
There's
of
nothing, hindi enough. Hindi
there's
enough
not
yung mga
enough to go
bagay-bagay.
around. Yes,
Mm-mm.
which is I think you mentioned this before, the exact opposite of an abundance mentality.
Yung,
Okay,
tama.
um,
Exact opposite of abundance mentality.
yes, and I don't know this myth of scarcity. Before I proceed further with it,
Mm-mm.
it's I think it's very deep seated, and I think here in the Philippines we suffer from that myth of scarcity.
Mm-mm.
I
Mm-mm.
know not all of our listeners are live in Metro Manila or have experienced riding the MRT or LRT, and we know how terrible that is,
Grabe.
right?
Parang patayan. As in, yung experience ko, sir, nasasabi ko sa utak ko, grabe naman to, parang patayan talagang, tulakan, ganyan, kahit may buntis, walang pakialam
Mm-hmm.
yung mga tao. Parang end of
It's a
the world.
very violent experience.
Oo. Papasok ka dun ng, kunyari, prinsesa ka, tapos paglabas mo dun, ano ka na,
Mm-hmm.
hindi ka na, parang nag-world war. Galing ka sa world war.
Gusgusin ka na.
Gusgusin ka na, oo, yun. Ganun nga
Well,
yung
I don't know.
feeling.
I think for me that illustrates the myth of scarcity.
Mm-mm.
Or even when people commute, in our public transport system, for example, in Katipunan, there are no
Mm-mm.
lines there when you have to take the jeepney from Katipunan. What happens is
Ah,
they don't want to line up. But why don't they want to line
oo
up?
nga, no.
Instead of lining up, di ba, nagbabalyahan. It's a struggle
Oo.
to get into the jeepney, especially during rush hour. It's because they
Oo
think
nga.
there's not going to be a next one. There are not enough jeepneys going around, so there's no point in lining
Mm.
up because if you line up, it means there's something that's going to come. But no, they don't want to line up. I want to get home already, and there's not enough jeepneys to go around. And it's the same
Ang
with the
galing nun,
LRT,
sir.
MRT.
Na-connect mo yun
Mm-hmm.
sa myth of scarcity. Oo nga, no, hindi tayo nagla-line pag sa jeep. As in,
Yeah,
tatakbo talaga. Naalala ko talaga yung
yeah,
experience ko dyan. Saka grabe yung mga jeep sa Katipunan lumilipad. First time ko, wala lang.
yeah.
Hindi connected. Pero first time ko kasi nakasakay ng jeep na as in parang lumilipad. Kung upo ka dito sa edge, pag after a few minutes or seconds, nandito ka na sa kabilang edge.
Mm-hmm.
Lumilipad talaga yung mga jeep. Pero grabe nga, no, sir, nagtutulakan. As
Yes.
in,
See how violent
tama
people
yung
can
sinabi
be.
mo na tama yung sinabi mo na kasi feeling natin, kasi part ako dun sa nakikipagtulakan. Kasi kung di
Mm-hmm.
ako makipagtulakan, hindi na ako makasakay. Noong umpisa, hindi pa. Pero ilan na yung nakadaan, wala. Hindi ako makakasakay. Kung hindi ako tatakbo, hindi ako
Mm-hmm.
nakikipag-battle with them. Tama, kasi feeling
Yeah, but
namin, kaming commuters noon, is, there are, walang enough na
it's not
na,
enough to go around.
sad. Pero meron namang enough. Di ba, sir? Pag nagkaroon ka ng abundance mentality,
Mm-hmm.
merong enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
And when you have an abundance mentality, you become less selfish. You can afford to
Tama.
share because there's more where that came from. Okay.
Tama.
So anyway, another thing that we're trying to save the world from is the resulting injustice. And injustice, as we
Mm-mm.
will find out later, has two elements: coercive
Mm-mm.
violence and deception. No? And when
Mm-mm.
there is no justice, obviously there's no peace.
Tama.
And so, what is justice? Justice is, well, as I understood it from the Bible does not give a specific definition, but generally it means justice means trying to live or choosing to live in rightly ordered relationships. Rightly ordered
Mm-mm.
relationships, first, of course, with oneself, with other human beings, with other non-human living beings, and of course with the rest of creation. And ultimately, since it's the Bible, it's living in a right ordered relationship with your God. Okay, so this is part of the things. These are part of things that we're trying to save the world from. Anyway,
Tama.
in this book by Gary Haugen, entitled "The Good News About Injustice," Gary Haugen is this Harvard cum laude who became a lawyer and founded this international NGO known as
Mm-mm.
the International Justice Mission. and he has this book. So he says that violence and deception, the two elements of injustice, they either work separately or together. Okay, and this is what he has to say about it. So first, injustice is difficult to confront because whether it's hidden or in your face, it involves the use or threat of physical violence. And the sad thing
Tama.
is, when we fight violence, violence fights back. Okay, so it just doesn't stay as it is. So that's why it's very difficult. Then secondly, when coercive force is used, okay, to cause injustice, the actual causal agent behind violent coercion is not necessarily the one that's implementing it. It can actually be
Mm-mm.
someone else. There is someone
Mm.
behind the scenes, as it were, who sends
Parang
those
ano,
who commit the actual
y-
violence.
parang yung mga actual casual agent, sila yung puppets, tapos merong
Yeah,
naglalaro ng puppets
mastermind.
behind yung mastermind, oo. Oo
Yeah, the
nga, no?
puppeteer.
Mm-mm. Okay, so
And
meron
then,
behind, may person behind the violence, hindi yung
yes,
mismong agents na
and that's
causing the violence.
and that's part of the deception. So you think you're
Oo.
fighting the violence or the injustice when you're dealing with
Mm-mm.
the persons actually committing it, but there's someone behind it, and they're hiding
Mm-mm.
behind. Okay,
Mm-mm.
and speaking of those hiding behind, most oppressors, especially the masterminds, will hold tightly
Mm-mm.
to a claim to legitimacy or proper authority. So
Mm-mm.
authority is power. Power is the ability to make people do what you want, and authority
Mm-mm.
is legitimate power. Okay, so I have a right to this power to use it as I want. But
Mm.
this lack of prop or this
To use
claim
it
to
as I
authority or
want,
legitimacy.
sir, to use it as
Mhm,
I want, so pwede din nilang gamitin for abuse. Kasi to use it as I want. Diba?
exactly. They would
Mm-mm.
claim that we have a right to this power. Okay, but
Mm-mm.
that claim to legitimacy, if you take it away, okay, it
Mm-mm.
removes the distinction between real authority, lawful authority, or plain criminality. Okay, so for example,
Mm. Oo nga.
if there is a coup d'état, okay, there's a coup
Mm-mm.
d'état. Those who will end up running the government ended up there running the government because they claim, hey, we have a right to this, but their only right to it is because, well, we have the guns and there's nothing you can do about it. But the reality is they don't have legitimacy. And yet they will claim,
Mm-mm.
well, we have a right to this position because, in a sense, we
Mm-mm.
earned it and now you have to follow. But then when they become
Mm-mm.
abusive, and we know that power corrupts, right? So
Mm-mm.
they'll end up using that power to cause violence, and they'll claim, oh, we have a right to do this because, yeah, we have this legitimacy. But take away that legitimacy, then they end up becoming no different from ordinary criminals.
Mm-mm. Tama. Pag tinanggal mo nga naman yung legitimacy na yun or yung right nila, same lang sila as
Hmm.
criminals. Oo nga. Nalulungkot
Yes,
naman ako
so it's the
sa
same thing,
mga
right?
ano. Mm-mm.
Well, that is part of the world we live in. Okay, so
Mm-mm.
now this
Kakalungkot.
we finally go to the question itself after almost an hour. So how can we save the world? In this case, how do we save the world from injustice? And
Mm-mm.
I'd like to acknowledge three people, three thinkers. Rene Girard, who's a French thinker, a literary critic,
Mm-mm.
the Jesuit Raymond Schwager, and the Methodist theologian Walter Wink. I've read their works, and a lot of what I'm going to share is really, I owe it to these thinkers for sharing it to the world. And I'm, re-echoing, which is what my surname means, Manaloto, one who echoes. Okay.
Galing! Ang galing, nililive mo
Okay.
yung ano, meaning ng last name mo, sir. Manaloto. Ngayon
Yeah,
ko
that's
lang
why
nalaman yun.
that's why I'm a teacher. The root word is talautaw,
Mm.
or taloto,
Mm.
which means to resound, to resonate.
Galing! Amazing! Ngayon ko lang nalaman yung meaning ng Manaloto. To
Hmm.
resonate. Ano yun, sir? To
To
resonate
echo.
na? To echo.
Yes,
Okay.
to echo.
Ganda. Galing.
So
Amazing.
now this
Okay.
brings us to our main topic. No? We talk about the myth of redemptive violence. Okay, so what is this myth of
Okay.
redemptive violence? It's a basic social myth or belief or ideology which claims that first, violence is innate to reality. Okay, might makes right. In other words, once I have power, whatever I do, since I have power, is basically right. Okay, so I'm
Okay. So
entitled to it because I have
yung might dyan
power.
is power, is strength, ganon.
Mhm.
Mm,
Yes,
okay.
power. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Then it also claims that violence saves. So if you don't want to have any more violence, you have to, you know, commit violence. In other words, if you want to have peace, you have to prepare for war. Okay, and you
Kaya
have to,
pala sa mga
engage in
movies,
war.
no, sir? Sa mga movies, violence versus violence. Parang
Actually,
lahat
uh,
ganun. Mm-mm. Pati yung mga sa superheroes,
yes,
violence, di ba?
a lot of our stories are actually, quietly based on the myth of redemptive violence, and that even the
Mm-mm.
old stories, which is what Rene Girard discovered, and I think
Mm-mm.
I borrowed that term from both the works of Wink, Schwager, and Girard, no, the myth of redemptive violence.
Mm-mm.
And another claim of the myth of redemptive violence is that you need violence in order to bring order to the world, in order to overcome this disorder or chaos that is in the world. So these are the
Mm-mm.
claims that are being made by this basic social myth or ideology. Okay. So then, what is violence basically? So, violence, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is the use of physical force to injure, abuse, damage, or destroy. So, it can refer to action or even a lack of action of persons or cultures. This includes
Mm-mm.
customs, institutions, structures, and they can be insensitive to and oppressive of human persons, turning human beings into victims. So it's an action or a lack of action that is insensitive and oppressive, turning people into victims. So there are many forms: physical, verbal, visual, cognitive, emotional, sexual, social, institutional, structural, economic, political, ecological, even theological. And it can be sensational, it can be hidden, it can be
Mm-mm.
intermittent or ongoing, it can be intentional or unintentional, but any action or non-action that turns people into victims, oppresses them, damages them, abuses them, that is violence. Okay, so this brings us to the question. So, how does violence end up as a solution to the problems of our world? Okay,
Mm-mm.
so here's an answer. That guy over there is Ted Peters. He's a Lutheran theologian. Okay, he was the teacher of one of my professors and later on colleague at the Ateneo. He says that the basic experience of anxiety leads people to lash out in violence. So it is anxiety
Mm.
that makes people
Tama.
violent. Okay, so what is anxiety? So he terms it a fear of loss, or describes it as a fear of loss, an overwhelming sense of insecurity, as well as the fear of not existing or non-being. Okay, so
Mm-mm.
this will bring us to what you were asking earlier. Okay, so anyway, one way of defining anxiety is a psychological, physiological, and behavioral state induced in animals and humans by a threat to well-being or survival, whether that threat to well-being or survival is actual or merely potential. Okay, so perceived threats activate the sympathetic nervous system and triggers what is known as the fight or flight response. Okay, so
Mm-mm.
what is this fight or flight response? Um, it is an adaptive survival mechanism in mammals, including us as human beings. This combination of automatic bodily reactions prepares our bodies to react quickly to life-threatening situations. Okay,
Mm-mm.
and more likely we'll be able to survive when this is activated. Either we flee to safety, or if we are unable to fight off the threat. And this reminds me one time when I was still teaching in the public senior high school, and we had no fences. There was this dog that entered the faculty room. Okay, Okay,
Mm.
there was only one door by which the dog could get out, and the dog, we were trying
Okay.
to drive it out. The dog could not seem to get out. So what did the dog do? Because it could not flee, it started to growl at us. Grrr. Because it felt trapped.
Gusto ko yung may reenactment, sir. Napili ko yun, saka nakita ko yung okay. Actor pala to si sir, ngayon ko lang nalaman. O, tapos, sir.
So
Grrr,
that's
ganon.
basically the fight or flight response, which you will find in both
Ah,
animals and human beings. And if I may quote
ah,
again from Ted
okay.
Peters, okay, he has this book, very good book, Sin, Radical
Mm-mm.
Evil in Soul and Society, but that's for another lecture. He talks about the 7 steps to radical evil. But anyway, in this book, he says, we respond to the threat of death with fear and frustration and perhaps even rage. We may seek
Mm-mm.
to create our own immortality by stealing the lifeblood of
Mm.
others in a misguided attempt to escape the anxiety caused by the prospect of our own non-being. Okay, whether by ourselves as individuals or together as a community, we kill, figuratively or literally, in the vain hope that someone else's death will sustain our life.
Gets ko na hindi ko
So
masyadong gets. Bakit yung death ng other people will sustain our life? Bakit ganun? Hindi
make us
naman,
seem live. Mhm.
hindi naman nahaba yung
So I don't
life
know.
natin na
Mhm.
nagpatay tayo ng other people eh. Pero, unless, threat sila to our survival. So, that's why other people kill. Kasi, alam mo, sir, nalungkot ako kanina
Mm.
kasi nakinig kami ng
Mm.
Seven Last Words. Tapos, nakakalungkot yung
Mm.
shinare nung isang nag-share kasi yung cousin daw niya, pinatay yung mom niya.
Mm.
So, naisip ko, paano naging na-extend yung life ng cousin niya dahil pinatay na yung tita niya? Diba? Parang ang weird what
Okay.
anger can do to other people.
Actually, it's a false belief. It's a myth, right? So we
Okay.
think it adds more to our life, but it's like this. It's, violence is similar
Mm,
to anger, and anger is a coping mechanism. For example,
mm,
for people, not necessarily those who are
mm,
depressed, but it's one sign. But even
mm,
when you're not depressed, when you become angry, you get this feeling that you have
mm,
power, that you have control over things. And
okay.
perhaps when we kill, whether, as I said, literally or figuratively, we get
Okay.
that same feeling of power and control, and we feel
Mm,
immortal, we feel godlike.
mm. Sa bagay, nung pag galit ako, tapos na-express ko yung galit ko, which, nung nangyari to when I was younger, parang I felt powerful nga naman. It's a false power.
Yeah.
Kasi hindi naman
Mm-hmm.
talaga, hindi ka naman talaga totoong powerful pag galit ka, naging destructive ka lang eh.
Mm-hmm.
Kalungkot, no? So, dapat mapanood to ng mga,
Yeah.
ng mga merong anger management. No, sir? Para,
Mm-hmm.
sila. Ay, paano ko kasi
Yeah.
babalik to?
So,
Yan.
so
Para
this now
matauhan
brings
sila.
us to how to respond to such threats, including the threat of non-being. So there are the more common ones. We talked about them. There's the flight
Mm-mm.
response. If you're faced with a threat, you run away from it. But if you can't run away from it, like the dog I was telling you about, you fight. But
Mm-mm.
aside from flight or fight, there is one which you mentioned in our conversations. I think this was with Chess Chua, where you
Yeah.
freeze. Uh,
Which happened to me this
um,
pandemic. Itong freeze. As in, nalulunod ako sa bed. Kasi usually I do
mhm.
the flight. Usually I do the flight.
But you
Okay.
can't,
So,
right?
I can't. I can't for the
And
very
I
first
think
time. Mm-mm.
yes, and freeze can also happen when, for example, with women, those especially those who end up getting sexually abused.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Sometimes when they are faced with the threat, they cannot.
Mm-mm.
They could have fight it. They could have run away from it, but more often than not, they're like deer caught in the headlights of an automobile, and they freeze. And this is also a threat
Mm-mm.
response. Okay,
Yeah.
so because they freeze, they end up getting sexually abused because some people idiotically think it's consent. Okay,
Mm-mm. But
but
actually,
yeah, they
it's
just
not. It's
froze.
part of the
Okay,
threat responses kasi we don't know how
mm-hmm.
to react towards it. Kaya
Yes,
nag-freeze kami.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you have fleeing, flight, you have fighting, fight, and you have freeze. But wait, there's another one.
Hmm?
According to psychology tools, okay, so there's also, aside from freezing, flight, and fight, there's also appeasing, where you give in,
Mm.
where you, okay, to avoid further damage, you give in. So it's sort of like you are, in a sense, responsible, except that you sense that you are powerless. Okay, so since I am powerless, I might as well give in, so there will be no more
Parang
damage.
surrender.
This
Parang surrender
yes.
ka dun sa sa
hmm
opponent. Mm. May pang-apat pala,
But
sir. Ang
unlike
alam ko lang
freezing,
tatlo. Oo.
well, I found these.
Mm-mm.
Okay, but there's actually another one which
Mm.
is not normally heard, but this is
Mm-mm.
from Shelley Taylor. She's a psychologist. And aside from fight or flight, she says, especially among women, there's this tendency to tend and befriend.
Mm. Paano yan? Yung parang
And
if you
this
cannot,
tend and befriend
if you cannot
will
fight them,
come into
join them. Parang
yes,
ganun ba yun?
but sometimes if you can't beat them, join them is sort of closer to appeasing. But here in tend and befriend, yeah, maybe yeah, that could
Mm-mm.
also be a way of interpreting. If you can't beat them, you join them. But tend and befriend later on will come into play, especially when we talk about the response of nonviolence.
Mm. Okay.
But normally here, when we're talking about the myth of redemptive violence, we're tending to focus on the response of fighting. Okay.
Okay.
So
I'm
anyway,
learning. I'm
so
learning
we talked about
so
threat
many things.
responses. So I don't know if I should skip this, but there's this question: has humanity always been violent? Okay. So oftentimes we'll think that humanity has always been violent, but if we look at
Mm-mm.
history or maybe even prehistory, archaeology, we will discover, and I read this in the book of Rian Eisler, okay, The Chalice and the Blade, where she quotes several archaeologists. She says that there are these two, okay, from Maria Gimbutas, who's a Lithuanian archaeologist, and the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans. So these two examples, Old Europe and Minoan civilization, are I mean, maybe the terms shouldn't be historical, but rather archaeological or prehistorical examples. No? So, Old Europe is this in the New Stone Age or Neolithic Europe, but this comes
Mm-mm.
before Indo-European culture. Indo-European culture is actually a very violent culture, but so this comes before in the New Stone Age, between around 7,000 to 1,700 years before the Common Era. And there's
Mm-mm.
also Minoan civilization named by Sir Arthur Evans after King Minos. Okay, King Minos is a mythical king of Crete. This is in an island in the Mediterranean near Greece, near Turkey. And this Minoan civilization spans
Mm-mm.
around between 3,000 to 1,100 years before our Common Era. Okay, so let's look at what Rian Eisler has to say about old European society. She says, one of the most remarkable and thought-provoking features of old European society, revealed by the archaeological spade, is its essentially peaceful character.
Oh.
Old Europeans never tried to live in inconvenient places such as high, steep hills. Unlike the later Indo-Europeans, as I said, who were very warlike, the Indo-Europeans built hill forts in places that are difficult to access, and these hill forts were usually surrounded by stone walls, cyclopean stone walls, because diba, cyclops they have one eye, so there are small holes which they can look out the walls into yeah these and outside the walls. Okay,
Mm-mm.
so what else? Old European locations instead were chosen for their beautiful setting, good water and soil, and availability of animal pastures. So they're remarkable for their excellent views of their environment and not necessarily for their defensive value. And furthermore, the absence of heavy fortifications, walls, no, and of thrusting weapons speaks for the peaceful character of most of these art-loving old European peoples. And that's
So
what she
ano,
says,
hindi naman
quoting
talaga
Maria
ano,
Gimbutas.
non-violent pa sila,
Mhm.
non-violent yung mga tao nung ano. Hindi lahat
Exactly.
violent. Mm-mm.
So yes, so there are examples because normally they keep thinking, oh, we find a lot of weapons. So maybe yeah,
Mm-mm.
we find a lot of fortifications or walls. So people are defensive, which means they're into war, no? But this is just one example, the old Europeans in southern Europe. But there's another example, the Minoan Cretan civilization, okay, Sir Arthur Evans. So she says, in contrast to other high civilizations of the time, Cretan art does not idealize warfare. So warfare is not an ideal. Neither are there any indications that the island of Crete's resources, material resources, were heavily invested in technologies of destruction, weapons making.
Mm-mm.
What else? In the Cretan towns without military fortifications, the unprotected villas on the edge of the sea, and the lack of any sign that the various city-states within the island of Crete fought one another or embarked on aggressive wars, of course, in sharp contrast to the walled cities and chronic warfare that were the norm elsewhere, we find the firm confirmation from our past that our hopes for peaceful human coexistence are not utopian dreams. So we are often told, oh, you're dreaming of something that doesn't exist. But
But
old
actually it does.
Minoan civilization in
Nag-exist siya.
Crete, yes. So it is possible. So we see this in our prehistory, in early history, that they do exist. So we are not perhaps then basically warlike as the myth of redemptive violence would have us believe. Okay? So it says here, particularly in its earlier Minoan period, Cretan art appears to reflect a society in which power is not equated with dominance, destruction, and oppression. The absence of idealizations of male violence and destructive power in Cretan art goes hand in hand with the fact that this was a society where peace endured for 1,500 years, both at home and abroad, in an age of nonstop warfare.
Mm-mm.
So it is possible.
Sir, meron ako request kasi meron tayo ngayon 5 million watchers. Can you define again, redemptive violence para maka-follow sila? Ano ibig sabihin
Okay.
ng redemptive
The,
violence?
okay. The myth of redemptive violence basically says that violence saves. Violence saves us from further violence. That might is right. That we need violence in order to stop chaos and bring order into the world. That's what the myth or the belief in
Mm-mm.
redemptive violence, that violence can save us from all of these things. But as we will find out
Mm-mm.
later, it really doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
So as I've
Yeah.
shown you in the previous examples, along with that tend and befriend response, that human beings may not necessarily be violent by nature. Okay. However, the widespread, the prevalence of the myth of redemptive violence has conditioned us to accept that this is something that we cannot change. It is a fact. Okay. So because it's so prevalent in our media, we began to believe it, right? So it's widespread for the media and even our cultural practices. We tend to treat violence as entertainment. We see this in the films, in the
Mm-mm nga.
stories, in the novels, right? Um, as entertainment, cultural practices. We give our children, especially boys, we give them toy guns, rifles,
Mm-mm. Which
pistols,
dapat i-stop na
okay,
yun, sir.
swords.
Dapat i-stop na yun. So, mga parents, ako,
Mhm.
it's one of my requests. Please stop giving boys na toy guns. Kasi you're teaching them to
Yeah.
be violent. Di ba,
Mm-hmm.
sir?
And even the games, the video games.
Mm-mm.
Okay?
Sad. At saka yung,
So,
yun nga, violence
yeah.
as entertainment kasi nagiging fun yung killing, ganyan. Ako,
Mm-hmm.
super grateful ko, sir. Super grateful ko sa mom ko kasi before, I do yung mga rough games sa mga
Mhm.
PlayStation, ganun. Tapos binawal niya ako. Talagang I stop. I don't
Mm.
I don't play mga games that involves killing or mga rough games or fighting. Kasi nakakondition
Mhm.
yung mind natin to to kill and to be
Exactly.
violent.
Yes.
So yan, to those who will watch this on replay and those who are watching live, please stop. Ay, nag-love shoutout to Ana Patricia Malta. Wala kang kupas, Mr. Manaloto. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
yun, mga kayuniks, please stop giving gifts na toy gun sa mga boys kasi you're teaching them to
Mhm.
be violent. And please, i-watch nyo yung mga pinapanood nilang mga films, mga cartoons kasi ini-introduce nyo sila sa violence if you allow them to watch violence as entertainment. So, yun. Buti na lang,
Mhm.
in-include dito ni Sir na itong violence as entertainment. So, mag-hi
Entertainment.
muna ako. Mag-hi muna pala ako, sir, sa friend ko. So, nag-love shoutout to Sugar Rocks RTV San. So, mag-shoutout muna tayo ng 4 watchers. Ate Tatiana, Renzli, Narciso, RTV San, and Ana Patricia Malto. Okay, mag-proceed na
Nakalaging
tayo
salamat.
sa
Sinalangin kayo.
Sinalangi. Anong Sinalangi,
Okay.
sir?
So,
Ano yung Sinalangi?
salangi kayo. Salangi, when you turn on lights, salangian mo rin sulu. But when you invite people into your home, you tell them, salangi ko po. So, salangi kayo po. You come into my house, right into it.
Parang you're
And
welcome,
that's what
ganun.
we're
So,
doing.
Kapampangan po yun, no? Yung Salangi.
Yes.
Salangi. Okay.
Yeah.
Salangi ko po.
Yeah. It's our way of saying welcome into our home. Bring light into
Okay.
our home.
Okay. Salangi ko
Salangi
po,
kayo po.
mga kainix. Yan.
Mhm.
So, tuloy na natin ang
Okay.
PowerPoint presentation ni Sir Manaloto.
So, like I said, it's so widespread, and we've been conditioned to resort to violence to resolve conflicts. But we know that this is not sustainable. Okay, if a society keeps on using violence, it will destroy itself. If we may use the words of the high priest in the Gospel according to the words of Jesus, no, in the Gospel according to Matthew, all who use a sword will be killed by a sword. Okay, so it's not
Which
sustainable
reminds
if
me,
we use
which
violence.
reminds me, sir, of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth.
Yes.
Diba?
And Gandhi also said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth will make the world go blind.
Oo nga. Okay.
Okay. So let's then talk about scapegoating, which is one of the mechanisms of the myth of redemptive violence. No? I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but the term scapegoating comes from the word scapegoat. You'll find this in the book of Leviticus, in the Torah or Pentateuch in the Old Testament, Leviticus chapter 16. Okay, it's a goat upon whose head are symbolically placed the sins of the people, in this case, the people of Israel, after which the goat is sent into the wilderness, the desert, in the biblical ceremony for Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is Hebrew for the Day of Atonement. It's like a communal confession session for the people of Israel, and the high priest will take all the sins of the people which they have confessed, and he will lay hands on this goat, okay, and the goat will be driven into the wilderness, the desert, where he will take the sins of the people. So that's what you call a scapegoat. Okay? And a scapegoat, I don't know, this is manifested in the words of the high priest in the Gospel according to John. It is better for one person to die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed. Which is actually, he's
Kaya
talking
pala
here about Jesus,
oo.
okay, who is
Which
going
is
to become
naging
the
din,
scapegoat.
Sir Christian, which is naging format din ng mga other movies na laging may one person na sinasacrifice in order to save the whole nation. Okay, so yun pala
Yes.
yung scapegoating.
Yes, scapegoating. So this is what happens, no, in a society where there is, disorder, uh, where people are fighting against one another, a conflict of all against all. They will resort to scapegoating. Okay, so how is that done? Aggression will be channeled by all instead of against all, but all against one individual or one group. And this group is usually usually marginalized, defenseless. Okay, and often these groups, these scapegoats, communities are usually different from the mainstream. No, that's why they're marginalized. They're few. They're defenseless, and yeah, they're other.
Like,
Okay, so
sir, like, what do you mean by yung mga marginalized and defenseless? Like
okay.
who?
Um, for example, I think we've been since 2016. Okay, we have been scapegoating and blaming them for the ill society. We've been blaming people who are drug pushers and drug addicts, and so consequently, we have the war on drugs. They become the scapegoat. Okay, of course, I'm not condoning them, but we do know that a lot of people go into drugs as a form of escape. Okay, but then what happened to them? They end up victims of extrajudicial killings. And as the president would term it, obosen. Okay? They are like a disease or rodents, vermin that must be eliminated. So it's for us who are not drug addicts or drug pushers, we easily find them. Oh, they are different from us. Oh yeah, let's get rid of
Okay.
them. So so that's why we demonize them. But how do we demonize them? We project onto them everything bad that is possible. They become demons. They are not like us. But the fact is, more often than not, we simply project the bad that is in us upon them. And we appear to ourselves as clean. But the fact is, if we look closely, a lot of these people whom we scapegoat, whom we demonize, are not really different from us.
Yeah,
They are a lot like us if we
because
look very, very closely.
no one is 100% clean.
Exactly. And that's part of the deception. We justify ourselves. Okay? We think we're so good. Okay? So this violence that happens in society is directed inwards within the community upon a scapegoat or outwards upon a common enemy. Nowadays, we are, well, you could say it could also be inwards, but okay, we refer to them as taong labas. Okay? They are insurgents. One of the scapegoats, so they are the communists. We red tag them. Oh, they're responsible for, or they are a threat to our society. So we red tag them. We label them communists. So they are outsiders. Okay? So these are new scapegoats. But are they really to blame? I don't know. To be honest, I think communism, I'm not saying that communism is passe, but we have seen that it has not really succeeded. And to a certain extent, the communist movement has sort of, become weaker. But if you start, red tagging people, you're actually creating the seeds of greater insurgency. So I don't know. Like I said, violence will only beget more violence. So scapegoating does not really work. Okay. However, there seems to be a good effect when people are scapegoated. The group which is divided because of the conflict of all against all in this attempt to unite in violence of all against one, the community becomes united, and they will be united in trying to get rid of the threat, the scapegoat, by either expelling them from the community or worse, destroying them because they are the source of evil. And the sad thing here is once they have expelled or destroyed the threat, they feel relief. And with this relief, they assume all is well. There is no more problem. But the fact is, we're just building
They
up to
created more
another.
problem.
Yes. For now, you feel relief. But later on, when the problems come back again, we'll start looking for new scapegoats. Okay? Thank you,
Sir,
Tati. Well, salamat.
so sabi ni Ate Tatiana, you are living your purpose, Christian. Ang galing. Tapos ang galing yung pangalan pa, ibig sabihin pala ng Manaloto, to Echo. Ayun yung last name niya, to Echo. Galing. Tapos yung name mo pa, Christian. Ang galing, sir. Amazing. You're living your name.
Ah,
Yan.
yeah. So, like I said, so we're talking about scapegoating. Pero dakal salamat. Makiramdam. So, but yeah, but does it really ultimately work? We've seen this in our history. Um, let's say, well, Marcos scapegoated the communists, right? Declaring martial law. Later on, we would scapegoat Marcos, EDSA Philippine Revolution. Then later on, there would be new enemies. Okay? Uh, we would scapegoat ERAP, okay, with
Mm-mm.
EDSA DOS, then Chief Justice Corona, and so on and so forth. We get rid of them, but does it really solve the problem? It doesn't. Scapegoating, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so which brings us to the question: is violence effective in resolving conflict? Okay, so violence as a response, is it effective? Here is what one of the greatest men in human history, uh, Mohandas Gandhi, and they often call him Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma, which is
Mm-mm.
Sanskrit for Maha, high, Atman, soul.
Mm.
So, great soul. Mohandas
Galing.
Gandhi, the one with the great soul. Okay? So, he fought for the independence of India, and he was able to do it with minimal or little violence. And these are the words that he says. He says, "A man who, when faced by danger, behaves like a mouse that is running away, is rightly called a coward, duwag,
Mm-mm.
cobarde." Okay? If we do not know how to defend ourselves, our women, and our places of worship by the force of suffering, if we do not know that, we must, if we are men, be at least able to defend all these by fighting. So we have to fight. We should not run away. What else does he say? Where there is only a choice between running away, cowardice, and violence, I would advise violence. This is coming from a man who promotes
Who is
nonviolence.
peaceful.
He says, I
Mm-mm.
would rather have India resort to arms in order to defend her honor than that she should, in a cowardly manner, become or remain a helpless witness to her own dishonor. It's like India is being raped, no? So I would rather have India fight with violence than to, remain helpless to her being dishonored. These are the words of Gandhi. No? However, as I said earlier, violence ultimately begets violence. Okay, and these are the words of an atheist philosopher named a German philosopher named Friedrich Nietzsche. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, one does not become a monster.
Ganda! Kasi ang tendency nga, sir, if we fight a monster, we ourselves, we become monsters. Ganda, ang galing
Exactly.
yan si Friedrich, hindi ko alam basahin.
Nietzsche.
Basta. Nietzsche.
Friedrich Nietzsche.
Ay,
Nietzsche.
Frederick pala. Friedrich Nietzsche.
Yeah.
Ganda. Whoever fights
Friedrich.
monsters should see to it that in the process, one does not become a
One does
monster.
not become.
Ganda.
Yes.
Galing.
Okay. So, in other words, since violence ultimately begets violence, it doesn't really solve or resolve conflict. It only sows the
Mm-mm.
seeds for later conflict, as I mentioned earlier with the
Mm-mm.
scapegoating mechanism.
Mm-mm. Sir
Okay.
Christian,
So,
I want you to share yung realization mo about those who are survivors of bullying. Kasi
mhm,
when we met last Wednesday, sinabi mo yung about bullying and ang
mhm,
galing ng realization mo about that. So I want you to share that to
yes.
our ka-uniques.
Okay. Like you, Dominique, I am
Mm-mm.
also a victim of bullying. So
Mm-mm.
that is why I admit now I am also a bully. But anyway,
Wow, very humble po yun
yeah.
sa
So
pag-admit niyo nun. Mm-mm.
But even though I'm a bully, I think maybe that's part of it. I also have a very strong sense of justice. So normally I will use my bullying powers when I feel something is wrong. But
Mm-mm.
why is this? So because I was bullied. In elementary at Holy Family Academy, there was this batchmate. Man, this
Mm-mm.
batchmate was coming from the lower sections. He was ugly. He was thin, he was ugly. And realizing it, if I was probably about the same size as him, because I was very small at that time and I was wearing
Mm-mm.
eyeglasses, I was afraid of him. No? But realizing if I was about the same size as his, I mean, I could actually beat him up. But he was so ugly and intimidating. And he would ask, akan yung baon mo? Na, biyeme na ako yung bakal mo. Right? And I
Grabe,
would give
sir.
it to him because I was
Anong
so,
grade kayo niyan?
yeah,
Anong grade kayo niyan?
Grade 2, grade 3. I think
Grabe,
I was still
no?
wearing shorts at that time.
Bullies at a very
Yes.
young age. Grabe.
Yeah, and he's so ugly.
Mm-mm.
Sorry. I still
Mm-mm.
remember his face. No,
Mm-mm.
but being bullied like that makes me feel so weak and powerless that you really want to fight back, but you're so
Mm-mm.
afraid and you can't fight back. And
You
when you're
cannot.
bullied, all that
Nag-freeze ka.
anger,
Mm-mm.
yeah, yes, all that
Mm-mm.
anger fills up inside. Anyway, as I still continued to get bullied later on, not just in Holy Family, but when I moved to Don Bosco for high school, okay, in
Mm-mm.
Bacolor. I also got bullied when I went to Angeles University as a college student. So bullying never really got away. But I don't know. So you can just imagine. I won't deny it. I am a man who's very angry and I'm a man filled with violence. Okay, I am not a man of peace. I'm not going to pretend I'm a man of peace. That anger
Mm-mm.
is still within me. But like I said, one of the
Pero
things I
sir, before
realized
you
during this
continue,
lockdown.
I want to honor your honesty. Kasi very honest ka that you're a man of anger right now. And ang very good no, that you're honest with yourself and that you honor din what you feel. Kasi pwede ka din, most people who get sick because they don't honor what they feel. Parang when they feel
Mhm.
angry, they feel bad about themselves na, I'm angry, I shouldn't be angry. Pero that's your feeling eh. That's you're subject to your to
Yeah.
your own feelings. Okay, sir. Pero grabe, no? Kasi ang
And
kinikwento mo is
mm,
grade 2, pero I could feel it as if you're telling me a story that happened just yesterday. Ganun siya kagrabe yung
mhm.
impact sa'yo. Which is impact din sa akin. Because
Yes.
of bullying, oo. O, tapos, sir, grabe. Grabe,
I think it
bahala na
has
si
made me
Lord.
who I am. Okay.
Mm-mm-mm.
But anyway, speaking of anger, right? Anger, I think, is like as I was saying earlier, is a way of gaining control over things, or at least giving yourself a feeling of control. But that anger has
Mm-mm-mm.
stayed with me. But later on, when I was able to start working, and then later
Mm-mm.
on, I became a teacher, and I began to gain greater confidence in myself. And yeah, I don't know. I think Miriam College, at least before the bad thing that happened, it was a very caring community, and I became
Mm-mm.
more secure
Very
about
peaceful
myself.
din.
Okay. Yes. It became secure about myself, and I realized I had power. Okay. And so then, I don't know, I began to realize that, okay, I can use this power. Okay. So I don't need to be afraid anymore. And actually, I'm not afraid of a lot of things, which is actually very dangerous. So
Mm-mm. It
with
is
that
very
power,
dangerous.
realize I'm tired of being
Mm-mm.
afraid. I'm tired of
Mm-mm.
being afraid. So let's do this. Okay. But all that bullying has made me who I am today. So I'm not afraid to fight. I'm not afraid to stand for what is right.
Mm-mm.
Uh,
Mm-mm.
Maybe you could even say I'm not afraid to die. But there are
Mm-mm.
other stories, but I won't tell them here right now.
Mm-mm.
But
Mm-mm.
that's all I have to say. That
Mm-mm.
I'm willing to fight. I could actually be even spoiling for a fight, but sorry, violent.
Pero gusto ko po yung nalaglag tuloy.
Sorry,
Naging violent na din yung
violent
so,
talaga.
sobrang
Yeah.
violent na nahulog na yung camera. Pero ang favorite ko dun, sir, is you're willing to fight for what is right. Clap-clap kita dun. Nag-work ba yung V8 ko, sir? Naririnig mo naman yung clap-clap, no? Kasi nagkaroon ako ng live streaming before. Pindot ako ng pindot dito ng clap. Di naman nagka-clap. So, ang ganda nun. Ang ganda nun, sir. And basta yon, I want to honor you nga for being honest with yourself. Kasi you cannot address something that you don't know. So, ngayon na you know that you're still angry, pwede mo siya ma-address in time that you're willing na hindi ka na maging angry. And, and hindi mo naman kailangan na hindi na maging angry kasi because of our anger, we can do things then. We can solve a lot of things because of anger. Kasi nga, ang ganda nung ang ganda na yung kanina, makinig sa, for those who are late, you just watch that on replay na. For example, yung mga doctors, mga nurses, they don't love disease. They hate disease, pero they go towards the disease para to heal it. Yung mga firefighters, they don't like fire, pero they go towards fire para ma-stop yung fire. And marami pang ginawang example si sir. So, sir, yung anger mo na yan, it could be yung feeling mo, yung emotion mo, that will move you to action niya kasi emotion para ma-address yung mga kinakagalit mo. Ganon. So, pwede kang, like, for example, pwede kang maging advocate for mga survivors ng bullies, ganyan, di ba? And yun nga, gusto mong ipaglaban yung, hashtag, sir? 528? 258? Nakamute ka, sir. Wait lang, nakamute ka. Minute mo yung sarili mo, sir. Hindi ko siya ma-unmute. So, yun. Basta may hashtag na sinasabi si sir, yung ipaglaban yung mga trees. Kasi nga, may mga puputulin na trees dito sa Pampanga. You tap your photo, sir. Ayan.
Hashtag 259, Friendship 259.
Friendship 259. So, okay lang, sir, talaga na
Yes.
magalit ka. Kasi yung galit mo na yan, that will move you to take action para, to be a source of solution. So, yon.
Yes.
Ang ganda. And sir, since naging honest ka din naman, I just want to be honest din. Kasi honesty and transparency din is what I want to happen sa channel ko. Almost na ako maging bully, sir. Almost. Buti na lang. Hindi natuloy kasi sobrang almost na. Kasi grabe talaga, mga kainig. Sobrang galit din ako. Pero yung galit ko pala, sir, it was just inside. Na nalaman ko through my unique guest. Kasi hindi ko pala siya nare-release yung anger ko. Siguro nare-release yung sa mga people near me, like yung mga friends ko and yung family, syempre, sila talaga yung makaka-witness ng very transparent self ko. Pero the time that I was talaga very angry, hindi pala siya ganun kahalata kasi I was doing masking. Pinamask ko what I feel, pero galit na galit talaga ako inside. Like, gusto kong since honest naman sir, no, nagkaroon ako ng time na nadaanan ko yung school where I got bullied. Nasusunog siya sa mata ko. Ganun kagrabe yung galit na na-feel ko. So, yun. Pero, ang ngayon, ang gusto ko mangyari is I want to be of help sa mga survivors ng bullying na they go towards peace, which is yung ginagawa nga ni Mahatma Gandhi. No, sir? Mahatma, tama ba? Yung peaceful, yung, which is a very peaceful person. Kasi, before mag-continue si Sir mga Phoenix, kasi kapag tayo, sobrang napuno tayo ng anger natin and naging tayong destructive ourselves, yun, sobrang puno tayo ng anger, instead na makapag-solve tayo ng, magiging solution to another problem, is we're creating problems. Kasi sir pala, naalala ko, meron nag-post sa Facebook ko, tapos sinagot ko, for the very first time, sinagot ko, yung galing sa school natin, sir. Nag-create lang ako ng more violence, sir. And sobrang grateful ko kay Ate Tatiana. Isa siya sa mga MTRCB ko sa Facebook. Nag-message siya, sabi niya, na Nick, please stop. Parang gumanon siya kasi nga, dapat hindi ako mag-go down towards their level. Pero anong nangyari, sir? Nakapag-create ako ng more enemies dahil I fought violence with violence. Kaya hindi talaga totoo yung means of redemptive violence, mga clinics.
Okay.
Ayun.
So actually, as we will find out later, I will be sharing some techniques on what non-violence basically is. But anyway, before we leave the myth of redemptive violence, I'd like to share this fact that in the work of René Girard, Raymond Schwager, and of course Walter Wink, and this is his book, Powers That Be. For me, this was a life-changing book. This is how I encountered the myth of redemptive violence. When I was studying at Loyola School of Theology, as a seminarian in San Jose Seminary, I was able to read this book. Okay. Oh, wait, I was no longer seminarian at that time. I was already teaching at the Ateneo.
Nag-seminary ka pala tayo. Ay, wait lang. Natawag kitang Tesor kasi wait lang. Nag-comment si Ate Tatiana ko. Natawag tuloy kitang Tesor kasi nabasa ko yung comment. Sabi ni Ate Tatiana, sabi niya, looking for a common enemy with a false feeling that problem is solved. Tama, it's a false feeling that a problem is solved. So, thank you very much, Te, sa
Yes.
MTRCB mo nung 2011 yun, sir. If na super vivid yung memory mo dun sa tinatawag mong ugly classmate, ako super vivid yung memory ko dun sa pinost sa Facebook ko. So, yun. Just wanna say sorry din sa mga na galit sa akin because I fought violence with violence nung post ko when I was 19 years old. Thank you very much ulit, Ate Tatiana, for being my angel. So, tuloy natin.
Okay.
Asan na? Ito.
So
Mali.
Jesus actually being the scapegoat would end up becoming the Lamb of God. You know? So he absorbed all this violence in himself, okay, in the cross, and it would reveal what the scapegoating mechanism is. It's simply legalized murder. So the scapegoat ends up becoming the Lamb of God, who was also the scapegoat, now unveils the violence of the scapegoating mechanism. Okay, that's the work of Walter Wink in The Powers That Be. So the crucifixion and death of Jesus of Nazareth, the Lamb of God, who is an innocent victim, reveals the failure of violence to save the world. Okay, and this is of course, another topic, but I won't get into it now. Okay, but one thing aside from that, even before he got crucified, we will find Jesus as a real prophet, because in his words and in his deeds, his actions, Jesus was someone who lived out the message of love, God's message of love through peace and nonviolence. And let me show you some examples. Okay, so this is from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 6. No? This is one of the things that makes Jesus distinctive. He teaches us to love our enemies. He says, love your enemies, be good to everyone who hates you. Ask God to bless anyone who curses you, and pray for everyone who is cruel to you. Love your enemies and be good to them. Then you will get a great reward, and you will be true children of God in heaven, who is good even to people who are unthankful and cruel. Have have mercy on others, just as your Father has had mercy on you. These are the
Basahin ko
words of
muna to, sir.
Jesus in the Gospel according to Luke.
Sabi ni Ate Tatiana, non-violent communication. Tama. So, yun. Sorry mga kiniks, naging tao lang ako that time. And sa mga times na nagiging tao ako. Ibig sabihin ko ng tao may emotions na, ganon. Kasi
Yeah,
diba,
because you
sir,
don't know what you're doing and saying
Hindi, actually, sir, nung time na yun,
when you're angry.
I know, nung sinagot ko yung mga ang cute naman ni ate. Meron siyang suggestion, mga kiniks, non-violent communication by Marshall
Communication.
Rosenberg. Ay,
Rosenberg.
non-violent communication. Oo. Ano ba sabi ko? Yun. Galing. So, may recommendation pa tayo dyan. Okay. So, sir, yun dun sa, yung ginawa ko kasi last time, sabi mo, for they don't know what they're doing. Actually, I know, kaso sobrang galit na ako na parang inisip ko, so sobrang pananahimik ko ba? Kaya talagang ina-attack nila akong ganito. So, nag-resort ako to violent communication. Kasi yun nga, myth of redemptive violence, mga kiniks, hindi talaga totoo na may masasave ka through violence kasi nag-create ka pa ng more enemies. Kasi anong nangyari, sir? Pati mga friends ko tuloy, nainis sa akin. Kasi nakainis nga naman yung sinagot ko dun sa bully ko. So, yun. So, sorry again for yung action ko when I was 19 years old. Ayan.
Yeah. But at the same time, one thing I noticed, if you're constantly angry, people will just tune you out. And sometimes your anger no longer becomes effective because they're already used to it.
Okay.
I won't mention the name of the professor in MC, but there's this professor who's always angry. And so we're used to him being angry. And even the students are used to him being angry, so that when he gets angry, it doesn't have any more effect, because they already tuned his anger out. Unlike me, generally, I don't know.
It's expected. Parang yung dun
it loses its effect.
Dun sa paano ba? Same lang naman na Same lang naman na professor pag girl or boy, no? Tama? Do not know what you're doing mean that you do not fully understand the full extent of your anger. Pwede, pwede. Galing. Another
Mhm.
thinker in the house, Ate Tatiana. Tama, tama. Ano kasi yun, sir? Anyway, pag professor, same lang naman na girl, ay lady, tsaka ano yun. Wala namang
Mm-mm.
gender yun. Okay. So, yung professor
No.
na yun, expected naman na ano, na lagi siyang galit. So, ako din, nababasa ko yun. Yun, expected. Pero yun nga, sir, tama ka. Pag ikaw yung nag-post ng ganun, as in, masyashock kami. Ha? Si Sir Christian, mag-rant sa, ano, sa Facebook. Yun. Pero ako kasi,
Yeah. But
first
even in
time kong,
class.
hindi ka ano, hindi ka galit, hindi ka dahak sa class.
Mm.
Na, sir. Very good
But
ka. Di
even in
mo,
class, I rarely get well. At least I can be angry, but normally I channel it by being sarcastic with
uh,
humor, dark humor.
mas okay
But
na
there
yung
are times
sarcastic
when
kaysa, kaysa nagiging
actually
dahag.
they appreciate that.
Mm-mm.
There are times when I really get fed up. Normally I
Mm-mm.
don't walk out. I remember this occasion when um, these were fourth year students at some mixed class, and one of the
Mm-mm.
students, it was actually trying to finish the lesson, and one student said, this is from MC, "Sir, kwento mo na lang yung love life mo." And I got so annoyed because I was trying to finish the lesson. And these were fourth year students because it was about the
Mm-mm.
end of the semester, second semester. And I got so
Mm-mm.
disappointed. I just, I ended up becoming quiet. And then I sat down and then I closed my laptop and then I said, "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, ladies, you're dismissed. You can read this. I'll just send you the presentation and you can read it on your own." And I could see, I think these were business to, these were from a
Mm-mm.
different course.
Mm-mm.
I could see them looking at me with anger. I mean, the ones who were paying attention. Then,
Mm-mm.
okay, they quietly left. Then the offending student with her, friend came to me a few minutes later and asked,
Said
"Sir,
sorry.
are you angry?" No,
Oh no.
didn't even ask for sorry. I said, "Sir, are you angry with me?" Yeah. And I said, "If I'm really angry with you, you won't be able to talk to me. I'll probably kick your ass." Sabi ko, "I'm not angry. I'm disappointed."
Oh,
But I was angry
ang
actually.
galing. Ang galing ng sagot. At saka at least na-acknowledge nila, sir, na ano, sila yung cause kung bakit ka
Mm.
nag-stop ng ano, stop ng lesson and you closed your ano, your laptop.
Yeah, but
Mm-mm.
I was really pissed. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the grace of office, of being a teacher. And, yeah, so I didn't
Mm-mm.
react violently. Or there was also this time. Sorry, I'm telling stories already. Um,
Okay lang.
uh, remember, I was part of the campus ministry, or even if when I'm not part of the campus ministry, I support their work. And we have Angelus at
Mm-mm.
noon, right? And
Mm-mm.
I was eating lunch in the faculty area. But then, so I was
Mm-mm.
quiet because it was Angelus. But it so happens I was looking out where the students are. And I saw one table, there
Mm-mm.
were these students who were my students, in fact. And they were,
Mm-mm.
having loud conversation while the Angelus was going on. And
Mm-mm.
then, so I waited for the Angelus to finish, but I could not help myself. So I stood up and approached the students. When the
Mm-mm.
students saw me, most of them went quiet. Okay. But this other student continued and looked at me and said, parang with the attitude na, parang, "So what do you want?" Parang, I can't
Mm-mm.
remember right now what she said, pero parang ano,
Mm-mm.
ganun. And
Mm-mm.
then, I wanted to hit the student. But what I did was,
Mm-mm.
because my hand was shaking, okay, I put my hand on the table to stop it from shaking because I was afraid that I was going to hit the student. And then I said, "Do you know what you just did?"
Galing mo, sir.
Ouch.
For your self-control.
Yeah. So, do you know what you just did? Then I tried to speak to them calmly. The others I could see they knew that they did wrong. But this
Mm-mm.
one, I had to hold the table because my hand was shaking. It meant that it
Mm-mm.
wanted to do action.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So,
Ngayon na lang ngayon na lang in action, mga clinics. Okay. Okay, sir. Proceed.
anyway.
Tapos, ano nangyari, sir?
So anyway,
Anong... You know what you just
well,
did? Nabitin ako.
I just give them a reminder. Normally I'd bring them to the ADSA, but I just didn't want to waste time anymore because I'm not sure if I was going to get across anyway. But at least the others in the group, they realized, okay, we did something wrong. But this one, well, I don't know if that student actually graduated.
Anyway, very good ka, sir, sa yung pagkakwento mo pa
Yeah.
lang, sir, na-imagine ko yung mga pangyayari. Very good ka sa pag-control ng kamay mo at niligay mo na lang sa table and tinanong mo siya, do you know what you just did? Ganda. Galing ni sir! Very good ka sa very good ka sa self-control. So, tuloy na natin yung ating PowerPoint presentation.
All I can say is I think that was the grace of office. Okay, I don't think that was me. Because it was me, I would have hit the student already.
It was the grace of
Anyway.
office and you allowing the grace of office to enter your being. So,
Yeah.
it's both, sir.
Yeah.
Kayong
So
dalawa.
I realized,
The
I don't
grace
know,
of office in you.
that the spirit of being a teacher. So anyway, going back to Jesus as the prophet of nonviolence, we saw how Jesus in the Gospel according to John treated the woman caught in adultery. Okay, they brought this woman who was caught in adultery to Jesus and asked, well, the law says we should stone her, and Jesus simply ignored them. He was writing on the ground, and in the end he said, okay, who among you has no sin, cast the first stone. That's all he said. And then they gradually began to walk away. And after they had all gone away, and he was left with the woman caught in adultery, he simply told her, have they not condemned you? And the woman says, none of them has condemned me. And he simply says to her, and go and don't do any more sin. Okay? So, very non-violent. When he was arrested in Gethsemane, in the Gospel according to Matthew, one of his companions, it was who remains anonymous, might have been Simon Peter, hit the using his sword, no, drew his sword and struck the servant. But Jesus told him, "Put your sword away. All who use a sword will be killed by a sword." Okay, and of course, on the cross, in the Gospel according to Luke, you have Jesus saying, "Father, forgive them because they do not know what they are doing." So all of these are just a few of the very clear examples that Jesus not only preached about nonviolence, loving nonviolence, but that he also lived it. Okay, that he lived it. You could find it in his own life. Okay, he embodied it. So this now brings us to nonviolence. So it's almost 9 o'clock now.
Okay lang, sir.
Okay, so
They can
yes.
watch on replay naman or revisit.
Yeah.
Gandhi.
Anyway, so let's get back to Mahatma Gandhi, who is one of the well-known promoters of nonviolence. He calls it ahimsa, okay, in Sanskrit. So he says, where there's only a choice between cowardice and violence, he says, I think you've read this before, I would advise violence. But I believe that nonviolence is infinitely superior to violence. Forgiveness is more manly than punishment.
Ganda.
Why is that? Right? I mean, like I said earlier, I wanted to hit the student. But which is easier to do? It's easier to just hit the student. It's more difficult to try to control yourself. So maybe that's what he means, that nonviolence actually shows that you are stronger and more powerful because you're able to control
Nililabot
yourself
na naman ako,
compared
mga
to simply
mas may power ka kasi mas nakakontrol mo kasi kahit sino naman sa atin, kaya natin pamatay eh, di ba? Pag sobrang galit ka, ganyan. So, pag nakakontrol mo yung sarili mo, mas powerful ka nun.
Yes.
Tama.
Okay.
Kasi
And
self-control
Gandhi
is
also
power.
says, yes, my creed of nonviolence is an extremely active force. It has no room for cowardice or even weakness. So, in other words, it's only for the strong. There is hope for a violent man to be someday non-violent. There is none for a coward. let me proceed. I'll explain why later, no? Or why not for cowards. So, nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of humankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction, devised by the ingenuity of man. Destruction is not the law of humans, so we are not basically violent. No? In fact, we are, yeah. So, nonviolence cannot be taught to a person who fears to die and has no power of resistance. A man who, when faced with danger, behaves like a mouse is rightly called a coward. Bravery is foreign to his nature. Okay? Before he can understand nonviolence, he has to be taught to stand his ground and even suffer death in the attempt to defend himself against the aggressor who bids fair to overwhelm him. What is he saying here? Cowards cannot become nonviolent. That's why he encourages people. Between running away and fighting, it's better for you to fight. Why?
Mm-mm.
Because if you fight, you realize that you have power. But if
Mm-mm.
you're a coward, you don't realize your power. And so you won't be able to use it. But as I was saying earlier, nonviolence is superior to violence because it takes a stronger person to be able to control his or her own power and the violence that may come with it. So that's
Tama.
why, surprisingly, for a man of nonviolence, he says, I'd rather have people use their violence because that is how they realize that the power that they have and that the damage that they can cause. And that since you do not want to cause greater damage, you will restrain yourself. And that restraining of
Mm-mm.
yourself requires a lot more power than is available to a person who simply
Tama.
relies on violence.
Tama, tama. Basahin ko yung very engaged si Ate Tatiana. So, kung meron tayong very good student, nangunguna si Ate Tatiana, sabi niya,
Mm-hmm.
honesty of what one truly feels is a vital step to getting to where you want to go. Taking responsibility is the opposite of scapegoating. Awareness that you have choice is powerful. Tama. Okay. Thank you very much,
Okay,
Te.
so now, how to save the world. So we're talking about, I think we're moving towards the end. Okay. So
Mm-mm.
nonviolence is actually two aspects. No, it first refers to a way of life. You can even call it a
Mm-mm.
spirituality, where you don't want to cause harm. You're non-lethal. But at the same time, you're
Mm-mm.
pro-life. You're
Mm-mm.
life-giving. Okay. On the other hand, in a narrower sense, it can refer also to what is known as non-violent direct action. And this refers to the variety of strategies and tactics for implementing change, but without making use of violence. So it can refer to the interiority, the spirituality that
Mm-mm.
is concretely manifested in what is known as direct action. Okay. So let's look at non-violent direct action. Oh, sorry. That's wrong. It should be non-violent direct action, should not be direction. I didn't notice that. So what are the
Pwede mo
six
siya, ay,
steps
kung
of
gusto mo siyang
non-violent?
edit, sir. Or hindi. Sige, wag na.
Okay, sige. I'll edit it. So
Mm-mm. Sige, sir. Edit mo muna. Nakakatuwa si sir, di ba? May
okay.
PowerPoint presentation pa siya. So, habang nag-edit si sir,
Well,
basahin natin ang comment ng ating top 1 student for tonight. Thank you for amazing content. This may
mhm.
not be a viral content, but this is still a seed that is sown to contribute to a better world. Oh, ang ganda! Dapat sumali to ng
Actually,
ng pageant si Ate Tatiana. Ang ganda ng mga sagot niya.
oh, takal salamat,
Actually,
ate.
tayo. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Hopefully,
Oh,
maka-next,
these are the
mag-viral yung mga contents natin. And how could that happen? If you continue liking my contents, watching, sharing, yon. So, that would be a big help. So, mega love shoutout to 4 million watchers, for you nanonood ngayon na active. Sobrang big help kayo para, maging viral tayo soon. Yan,
yeah.
edit na ni Sir.
Okay. So these are the six steps. Okay. I placed the first as personal commitment because I think that's where it all starts. Then you have information gathering, educating others,
Mm.
negotiations, direct action, and reconciliation. So let me get to each of them. I'll deal with personal commitment last. It's a good
Okay.
way to close. So first, you have to gather information. So identify the issues in the community
Mm.
that are in need of change, positive change. So, and investigate these issues so that you can understand them. I think it's basic to any discernment to any action, that you know the information, because wrong information can make you make wrong choices and wrong decisions.
Tama.
Okay, so it should include all sides of the issue and may include, of course, formal research. And I think this is very important: listening to the experiences of others, especially those
True.
are who who don't think like you. Okay, and I think this is one of
Super
the
true.
nice things about your live streaming. You invite
Mm-mm.
different guests who have different perspectives, and I'm one of those
Mm-mm.
with a different
Mm-mm.
perspective.
Mm-mm.
So aside from
Thank you
information
very much for
gathering,
saying yes.
just like what I do, you have to educate other people. So it's not enough for you to be informed. You have to help others to be well informed as well.
Mm-mm.
So you have to let other people know, become aware of the issue that needs change. And you have to make them feel why it's important to do something about it because of its impact. At
Mm-mm.
the same time, when you educate other people, whether it's about the coronavirus, whether it's about communism, or it's about nonviolence, this will enable people to eliminate misunderstanding. Of course, the assumption is people should be at least neutral, they should be at least open minded. The difficulty is when people are very emotionally invested in their beliefs. More like than not,
Mm-mm.
they'll only see what they want to see, and
Mm-mm.
yeah, they'll tune you out if they think that you
Mm-mm.
disagree with them.
Mm-mm. Sadly, which led us,
But
yung other people pala, to killing. So, sobrang passionate
mhm,
nila to their beliefs. Ganun sila ka-passionate
yes,
na they
but
can
I think
kill.
that passion is also rooted in insecurity. They think that there's a real threat, and the threat has to be removed by killing. But unfortunately,
Mm.
killing is only a temporary solution. It's not even a very good solution. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
So
Oo nga.
aside from informing other people, it also helps you to gain allies, which I'll tell you why that's important later.
Mm-mm.
Gaining more to help you support, and you may need to negotiate. And sometimes to negotiate, you need to use your grace, your humor, your intelligence. Okay, so by using these, you can confront individuals whom you need to become your allies, because you can't do it alone. Okay, and you need all the
Mm-mm.
help you can get. So you need to come up with a plan to, resolve these injustices. And at the same time, it's always good to see things in a positive light. As Jesus would probably say, who is not against you is for you. Okay.
Mm-mm.
So you
Tama.
look for what is positive in every action and statement by the opposition. So don't think that they're trying to sabotage you. Uh,
Mm-mm.
they could be your allies, especially if you trust them. Because if you come from a space of distrust or mistrust,
Mm-mm.
then I don't know, it's going to affect the way they interact with you. Oh, yeah, this is very important. Do not seek to humiliate the opponent, but call forth the good in the opponent. Um,
Mm-mm.
in nonviolence, the aim is not to win, not to defeat the opponent, but to make sure that change that will benefit everyone succeeds. It's not about winning. Okay,
Mm-mm. It's like not
so
winning the argument, but winning the relationship.
winning the war. Yes. So you
Mm-mm.
it's not about winning battles, it's about winning the war. And it's, as we will find out later, it's not about fighting individuals, but it's about, making sure that issues are resolved. So as I was saying
Mm-mm.
earlier, you have to find ways in which your opponent or the one who doesn't think like you becomes your ally, because we all need the
Mm-mm.
help that we can get. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Then
Correct.
finally, we talk about direct action, which is, as I said, this is one of the aspects of nonviolence. This deserves a topic in itself, but let me just go through it. So these are actions that are taken to convince others to collaborate, to help you work together to resolve this injustice. It's most
Mm-mm.
effective when the direct action shows how the injustice works and how you can actually fix the injustice. Okay, so there's a link there. You can, well, you can actually search that. So the 198 methods of nonviolent action. You
Ang
can even
ganda,
download the
marami.
PDF copy.
Mm-mm.
Yes, but then it only lists them. Then you could probably Google it if you're. And there's a lot you can actually find online. Okay. So anyway, so there are hundreds of forms of direct action. So I mentioned there are at least 198 mentioned there. Just some of them. So in general, you have nonviolent protest and persuasion. you have non-cooperation. It could be social, economic, political. There's
Mm-mm.
also nonviolent intervention. Just to show some
Mm-mm.
examples, okay? So for nonviolent protest and persuasion, you can, do political action. Okay? You can
Mm-mm.
even vote. You can campaign for your candidate. Okay? Of course, you know these. You can write letters to your legislators, to your local government. You make petitions, campaign like the hashtag Save the Trees, hashtag Friendship 259. Okay? Some people do it, their protest by, doing public performances, theater, visual arts,
Mm-mm.
performance art, installation art. Okay? And of course, the more popular or better known ones, protest marches and rallies. So this is just some. Okay, there are many more.
Mm-mm.
Non-cooperation, you have boycotts. Okay, boycotts refer to the refusal to buy certain products. Just before EDSA People Power in 1986, Cory
Mm-mm.
actually encouraged people to boycott the companies that were owned by the Marcos cronies, including the company San Miguel, which was under the control of her cousin Danding Cojuangco. Okay, and to withdraw their money from crony-controlled banks. It actually worked. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Another form of non-cooperation is through strikes. Okay. I think we had this conversation about strikes. For example,
Mm-mm.
people in Metro Manila used to complain, or maybe they still are complaining about the state of public transportation, how terrible it is. And personally, my recommendations is for people, all the working people of Metro Manila, to stage a 1-day strike. They don't go to work, and that will paralyze Metro Manila. Now, the purpose of the paralysis of Metro Manila through a strike of the workers is just to make them feel,
Mm-mm.
make the government feel this is important, so you do something about it. Okay, I think it's the same thing with transport strikes. But what I noticed is people are afraid to do that, or even among jeepney strikes. Not all of the jeepney drivers join. What's their argument? Well, if I don't make pasada, my family is going to go hungry for a day. Yeah, maybe it's true, but 1 day, a sacrifice of 1 day is a small thing compared to the possible change that you could bring about when you work together, when you are united in trying to make,
Mm-mm.
people who can do something about it take action.
Mm-mm. Tama.
Can you imagine that, right? Or even students, no? Students who are, let's say, protesting about sexual harassment in the school, they decide, okay, we're going to go to our class, but we're not going to do anything that the teachers want us to do. So these are forms of,
Mm-mm.
non-cooperation. We are direct action. Of course, there's non-violent intervention. There's one of the examples is hunger strike. Ninoy Aquino, when he was arrested and accused of committing sedition against the Marcos regime, he went on hunger
Mm-mm.
strike while he was a political prisoner in Laur, Nueva Ecija, in Camp Magsaysay, Fort
Mm-mm.
Magsaysay. So he nearly died because of that until he was convinced that God wanted him to live so that he could continue fighting another day. So these are just some examples. Um,
Mm-mm.
which, of course, I'm
Wait,
having mentioned EDSA
wait
People
lang, sir.
Power.
Basahin ko muna si, si
Sure.
Rensley. Ayan. Okay, so
Rensley was
sabi
my
ni
former
Rensley,
student.
Rensley Narciso, sabi niya, thank you for
Nakasalamat,
this
Rensley.
content. Galing talaga ni Sir. Clap, clap. Ayan.
Nakasalamat, Rensley.
Mm-mm. Galing talaga ni
Rensley
Sir.
is my
Sayang, sir,
daughter.
hindi kita naging teacher. Sayang. Super ma-enjoy ko yung class mo, for sure. Hindi ko kasi naging teacher si Sir eh.
Ah,
Sayang. Kahit substitute lang,
lucky
sir,
you.
hindi ka nag-sub.
No,
Lucky
unfortunately.
pala.
Lucky
Hindi.
you.
Hindi ko siya naging
You never had to
teacher.
suffer my
Lucky pa.
class.
Grabe naman yung suffer. Siguro hindi. Hindi naman ako mag-suffer. So, yan. Tuloy na natin. Rensley, bakit
Well,
hindi ka pa nakaka-like and subscribe? Pa-like and subscribe naman. Baka naman.
mhm,
Ayan.
yeah. Rensley is a third year BS Psych student at the City College of Angeles. She was my student in Rafaela Satin. And she was the
Mm.
social science awardee.
Wow!
when they
galing!
graduated.
Ang galing naman ni Rensley. Galing. Congrats,
Yeah.
Rensley. Ako, sir, kung hindi ako, sabi niya, haha, sure po. Thank you so much. Thank you so much sa like and subscribe. And ako, kung hindi ako naging communication art student, magiging psych student ako. Kasi I love,
Oh.
psych. Super nag-enjoy ako.
Actually, psych and communication, there are a lot of theories that are related. I did sit on the panel of thesis for comm students. And then when they talk about all these comm theories, a lot of them I can relate with because I'm a psych major.
Sabi ni Rensley, may pag-flex si Papa, ha ha ha. Thank you po.
Flex.
Kaya lang talaga, like attracts like. Alam nyo ba, 5 lang kayong live watchers ngayon. So, konti lang tayo. Sinali yung sarili. Konti lang talaga. Ba't ganun, sir?
Well,
Konti
thank
lang
you.
tayo mga...
Dakal salamat, karing sinalangi.
Dahil salamat, sinalang.
Karing sinalangi.
Yan. Karing sinalangi.
Those who,
Ang galing naman ni
lighted.
Rensley, i-add mo ako sa Facebook. Baka gusto mong maging unique guest. Dahil super galing mo. Tuloy na natin.
Okay.
Super
So,
good. Sana
what I'm going to show are
sana
just some photos, okay, from the EDSA People Power Revolution. You have all these people, surrounding tanks, okay? But these are unarmed people, civilians. All they are carrying with them are their rosaries, their religious images. And here they are faced, battle tanks and soldiers carrying assault rifles. Okay, so what else? Here you have the madre. See, the madre are kneeling, praying the rosary, while there are these soldiers heavily armed.
Grabe, no?
Okay.
Grabe yung bravery nila, sir, kasi may mga rifles, tapos they're just bringing their rosaries and themselves praying, kneeling.
Actually, that's part of the non-violent direct action.
Yun nga.
Because they are also trying to appeal to the soldiers, most of who are, have a macho mentality na, okay, we cannot hurt women, so women are weaker. But this is used to a certain extent to prevent them from, hurting them. So the women, especially the madre, and we're a very religious society, even though they may not necessarily believe in God, but they show respect to people of religion. So that's why they place the women who are religious, okay, and on their knees. So how could you, if you're, it just shows how weak you are. I don't know. So
grabe na lang sila
and
kung
here,
papatayin talaga nila yun, no, sir? Sobrang wala na silang conscience pag
Exactly. So that is one way of resisting without using violence. So you are using, as it were, weapons that do not hurt, but still get it done. Okay. And in the next slide, there are 2 photos there. Or actually 3. There's a small oval there, which shows a flower into the barrel of a rifle.
Cute!
Okay.
And
you have women here. Yes, they're giving them flowers, and I couldn't find the picture, but it was in a video. They were giving sandwiches to the soldiers who were obviously hungry. Sometimes either sandwiches or cigarettes, because these were also human beings, and this is a way of showing we are not your enemy, okay? Or even if you consider us your enemy, we're not here to hurt you. So why do you have to hurt us?
Ganda.
Okay.
So,
and here
sir,
is a colored
version. Si Rensley. Hala, sure po.
Okay.
Ibig sabihin ba niya nag-oo ka sa guesting? So, private message me at Facebook. Excited na ako.
Yeah.
Excited na ako ma-meet si Rensley. Okay.
Oh, you're going to enjoy Rensley.
I'm sure.
Rensley is a very deep thinking person and very passionate person.
Gusto ko ng mga deep thinkers and passionate. Ano yan, sir? Ina-offeran ng drink? Drink ba yan?
That's actually a flower.
Flower.
See the stalk of the flower. Yes, I'm not sure if that's a
Okay, okay.
daisy. So this young girl is offering a flower to this battle-hardened marine. Yeah. So
Aww.
these are just ano. So why am I showing you these
Cute.
examples? So this is an example of clear manifestation of non-violence at work. In that
Mm-mm.
song by Jim Paredes, Handog ng
Mm-mm.
Pilipino sa Mundo, mapayapang
Mm-mm.
paraan ng pagbabago. Kapayapaan,
Mm-mm.
kalayaan, katarungan ay kayang makamit na walang dahas basta't magkaisa tayong lahat.
Mm-mm.
So,
Sir, may sinasabi si
so
Renly,
this,
because mana po ako kay Papa.
okay, sige,
Yung
may
mga
muli na ka
estudyante
na
mo,
ako.
Sir, Papa yung
Ah,
tawag sa mga estudyante mo? Kasi kahit
I actually,
Kring,
mm,
si Kring Talya din, mga
mm-hmm,
kainix, may client. Si Sir Christian kasi, Sunlight client ko din siya, and ito, unique guest ko na. Tapos si Kring Talya din, my client, my friend, and unique guest din.
mm,
Sabi ko, meron ka ba naisip na refer sa akin for Sunlight? Tapos sabi niya, nagkaroon ka na ba ng ng client na professor, ganon. Tapos sabi ko,
mm-hmm,
meron, sabi ko ganon. Tapos si Sir Christian Manaloto, kasi ikaw yung first kong first din pala kitang professor na client, sir. I mean,
oh,
professor sa galing kong school, oo. So, first kitang professor,
mm-hmm,
first unique guest din. Tapos sabi niya, sayang, sabi niya, very fatherly yun, si Sir Christian, sabi niya. Yun yung trait na sinabi sa akin ni Kring, fatherly ka daw.
okay,
So, naalala ko to kasi sabi ni Rensley, because mana po ako kay Papa. So,
okay,
yan, nakakonsider ka talaga nila na na father. Yehey, meron akong unique guest, si Rensley.
okay.
Ayun.
So anyway, I've been showing you these photos of it's a 1986 People Power to show that it does work, that we were able to get
Mm.
rid of a dictator who used violence without violence. And this
Mm.
was an occasion where as Filipinos, wherever we went in the world, they would actually, look up to us. Filipino. Not unlike today,
Mm.
when you go abroad and they find out you're
Mm.
Filipino, they would say, Pacquiao, roll
Mm.
eyes. But this was a time when Filipinos, anywhere they went in the world, taas noo, very proud,
We're known for being
because of what they
peacemakers
were.
before, no?
Yes.
Mm.
That despite their fear, they were able to drive a dictator out without the use of violence. Well, of course, I'm not
Mm.
going to talk about what happened afterwards, but this event,
Mm.
despite
Mm.
whatever they say about it, was something that was very important in the history of
Mm.
the Filipinos. And I think the
Mm.
spirit should continue. It is not only for the Dilawan. I don't care if people will call me Dilawan because I am not. Okay.
Mm.
Anyway, sige. So I think we're coming to a close. Okay, so
Mm.
you've met this line before. Whoever fights monster should see to it that in the process one does not become a monster.
Mm.
So again, one should aim to avoid becoming what one hates. Okay, of course we
Tama.
fight
Ang
what we hate.
ganda.
Okay. However, opposing evil in society will unleash evil within oneself. Okay,
Mm.
and we all have that tendency to deceive
Mm.
ourselves. Remember,
Tama.
part of deception is not only part of injustice, not only violence, but also
Mm.
deception. And we have that tendency to be self-justifying. Self-justifying is when you see yourself as holy and without sin, while others are sinful. Um, Ted Peters in his book talks about that, but that's another topic. Okay, so we have
Mm.
to be aware of that we have to be honest with ourselves, that we should not fool ourselves and not become, as Morgan Scott Peck would put it, people of the lie. Okay, so
Ang
it is
ganda,
very
sir, nung
important.
ang ganda, sir, nung nakalagay dito na yung previous slide, sir. Previous
Mm-hmm.
slide. Or nandun ba? Or sinabi mo? Ayan, one should aim to avoid becoming what one hates. Kasi
One
usually,
hates.
kung sino usually what we hate, ang nagiging tendency is we become like them. Diba, like, kunyari,
Yes.
sa mga movies, ganyan, sasabihin, I don't wanna be like my mom, or I don't wanna be like my
Mm-hmm.
dad. Pero eventually, anong nangyayari? nagiging silang parang katulad nun. So, sobrang hate nila doon. So, sobrang naging familiar yung ganong ginagawa sa kanila. Nagiging ganon sila. So, magandang, magandang reminder to na one should aim to avoid becoming what one hates.
Becoming.
Yan.
Yeah, but Rene Girard, in part of his work, would say that people learn by imitation, gaya gaya tumaya. Or I think they also have this in when you're with Sun Life and you teach your agents monkey see, monkey do, right? So basically, we end up copying one another, and we learn that way. So it's vital. That's why even when we fight, we tend to copy the opponent, the enemy. Okay? So that's why it is very important to always be honest with oneself. Okay, to yeah, to be honest with oneself. I think it's very important. You can lie to other people, but I think it's even when you lie to other people, you should always be honest with yourself. And
Tama.
maybe if you're honest with yourself, you will find it also easier to be honest with other people. But more than
Correct.
just being honest with oneself, we must also be always compassionate with oneself, with ourselves. And maybe by being compassionate with ourselves, we can be compassionate with our enemies. And maybe somehow be able to follow the teaching of Jesus to love our enemies. At the same time, Jesus commands us to love our enemies, not to like them. No, we don't have to. There's a difference. No, we don't. When we love somebody, that doesn't mean we have to like them. Okay. Liking is having positive feelings for a person, to have pleasant feelings about a person. Loving them, yes, may involve feelings. It's good to like the persons that we love, but loving them means that we would want good for them. They're good. So at the very least, in loving our enemy, we should at least strive to do them no harm. But non-violence is non-lethal. And yeah, it's when we love the enemy that is part of non-violence. No, that's why we don't intend to win over the enemy. I mean, to win over in the sense that we don't defeat the enemy, but we win over the enemy in the sense that we, make turn our enemy into our friend, which of course is not always easy, but that is part. After all, if we imitate each other, when we show true love for our enemies, maybe somehow our enemies may also be transformed. They end up copying us. Anyway,
Meron ako
there's
naalala,
so
sir,
much.
na may naalala ko na interview from a former PBB na Christian
Mhm.
yung PBB. May nagtanong sa kanya, hindi ko lang sino nagtanong na interviewer, sabi niya, do you like ganito, yung PBB, another PBB housemate. Sabi niya, I love
Mm.
her. Sabi niya, I love her. Ang
Mhm.
very good nun. Ang very good nun. Kasi itanong siya. Ay, yun na yung sinasabi na yung difference ng like at saka love. Kasi yung like is a positive
Mhm.
feeling. Diba, sir? Ang
Mhm.
galing nung sumagot no PBB housemate. Ito, one does not have to like
Yes.
the enemy, but at least one should
Yes.
strive to do them no harm.
Them no harm.
Mm-mm-mm.
To be non-lethal.
Tama.
Okay. So, two more. The next step is reconciliation. Okay. So, in reconciliation means non-violence will seek friendship and understanding to create allies. Okay.
Mm-mm.
Non-violence, as I said, does not seek to defeat the opponent, to win over the opponent and make him your friend. Okay.
Mm-mm.
And non-violence is directed not against persons, okay, but it is directed against unjust and oppressive systems, policies, and acts. That's why there's this saying, hate the sin, but love the sinner.
Mm-mm.
Right? So,
Hate the sin
and
and not the sinner.
yes, to win the sinner over. And then finally, as I was saying, this is for me the core, the
Mm-mm.
foundation, personal commitment. Okay. So check and affirm your faith in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. So you have to study it and then you have to convince yourself. Okay. Prepare yourself to accept sacrifices if necessary in your work for justice because nothing really ever comes easy. I think Gandhi also says this that you have to be willing to die for what you believe in, to suffer for what you believe in. And change is never easy. It requires dedication and long hours of work. So if you want change, it doesn't come overnight. And meet with others regularly to stay focused on your goal. It's like, accountability groups. Churches are beginning to have this now. So this brings me to a quotation from one of these manuals of those who are promoting change in the environment. So he says, I come back to what I think are the building blocks of movements. These are relationships. Relationships with each other, with ourselves, with the elders of our movement, and the spirits of those who have gone before us. Okay, our biological and even ideological ancestors, relationships with our fellow plant and animal life, and of course with our Mother Earth. We've talked about this earlier. Okay. Movements, including the non-violence movement, are at their best when they are growing love. They are an act of collective hope in the face of long odds. In our groups and campaigns, we build relationships. These webs and fabrics of communities are how we will see this crisis through. Our tenderness and care for each other during each step binds us closer. And to do that, we have to remain loving inside ourselves. Uh,
Last
well,
na
I
ba yun?
think that's
Last
it.
line na yun.
Yep, yep,
Mm. Gusto ko,
that's it.
sir, yung before kitang tatanungin, yung previous slide nga, sir.
Mm-mm.
Previous slide. Ito, ang ganda nito eh. I come back to what I think are the building blocks of movements, relationships with each other, with ourselves, with our movement elders, and familial
Movement.
spirits of those before us, with our fellow plant
Mm-hmm.
and animal life, with our Mother Earth. Kasi ang sinasabi dyan basically is di ba, support group. Kasi iba kasi pag part ka talaga ng yung meet regularly pala, previous pa pala sir, may previous dyan na may meet regularly.
Meet with
Saan ba
others
yun?
regularly to stay at the bottom, to stay focused on your goal.
Ayan, meet with others regularly to stay focused on your goal. Yan yung importance talaga ng accountability partner or support group. Kasi pag mag-isa ka lang, like ako, sir, sales yung namin, work namin sa Sun Life. Pag ang tendency, pag nagsosolo-solo
Mm-hmm.
ka, you feel talaga alone, lonely, ganyan. Parang mag-isa ka against the world, ganun. Kaya kailangan natin ng mga support groups that we meet regularly. I just want to plug, ikaw na mag-plug, sir, kasi part ka naman. Kung naalala mo yung unique support, plug mo nga, sir. Na-experience mo sa unique
Well,
support.
I think, well, usually in the first time I attended, it was just the two of us. But it's if you need someone to talk to on the first and is that correct? First or second and fourth, or is
First
it
and
first and
third.
third Saturday?
First and third.
First and third
First.
Saturday nights, okay, and you need someone to talk to, or at least someone who will listen, or just want to be there and feel that there are people who are there for you. You might want to join this unique support group that our friend Nick here is promoting. So it's from
It's
8 to 10
yeah,
every
8 to 10.
first
Ang
and
galing
third
naman
Saturday.
ang galing ni Sir once pa lang siya nag-attend. Kasi mga kainis ito, no strings attached yung unique support. You attend whenever you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Ang sinasabi ko doon is, we celebrate life with you pag happy ka and we are there for you kapag sad ka. It's just a safe space, ganyan. So, paminsan, isa lang kausap ko, paminsan 10, paminsan 2, 4, ganun. So, basta, open yung schedule ko for unique support every first and third Saturday, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And the fee is free. So, yan. You just chat
Mm-hmm.
me for the link para isa-send ko sa inyo yung magiging part kayo nung group. Ang maganda dun, sir, mega love shoutout ko si Ate Jessica Cruz kasi siya yung reason bakit na-build yung unique support. Kasi nung nag-usap kami, sabi niya, Nick, I want to meet you regularly. Sabi niya ganyan. Sabi ko, sige. Sabi ko, let's meet twice a month. Ganun. Kaso nakaka-shy. Sabi ko, 2 hours may bibigay ako ng 2 hours kasi I love listening and I love also talking. Ganyan. Tapos, sabi niya, kaso sayang yung oras mo. Ganun. Hindi, mag-create tayo ng group. Ganun. Tapos, nung night na yon, nung first meeting namin, nakreate yung unique support. And ever since then, laging may nag-a-attend. So, thank you very much, sir, kasi nung time na nag-attend ka, sana walang mag-attend nun. Pero sa pilitan, ewan ko sa pilitan ba or pagbigyan, nag-attend ka. So, at least, tuloy-tuloy talaga yung unique support ko. So, thank you so very much, sir. Sa iyong support, sa
You're
unique
welcome.
support. Okay, sa last ng... Ay, tapos na ba? Last slide? Tapos na yung last slide, sir?
Last slide.
Yan. Ang ganda nito. To do that, we have to remain loving inside ourselves. Ganda. So, natapos na ni Sir yung kanyang presentation. Akala ko abot tayo ng
Well, the
ng
next would
3
be
years.
just my references.
Professor na professor, may references. Ibang level. Pa-level up ng pa-level up yung mga unique guest ko, sir. May pa-references pang nalalaman. Tama. Tama.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot. Finding our way again, the return of the ancient practices.
Yes. It's a good book. And yeah.
Ganda. The powers that be, theology for a new millennium. Nice. Sabi ni Rensley Narciso, clap, nice papa. Saka sabi niya, walang kupas talaga.
Salamat, Rensley.
Sabi pa nga niya sa akin, pwede ba ako mag-PowerPoint, Nick? Sabi ni Sir Christian, sure, mag-PowerPoint ka. Mahirapan yung mga next na unique guest kasi si Van niya, saka si Sir Christian, nag-PowerPoint presentation. So, mga next na unique guest, baka gusto niyo din mag-PowerPoint, pero hindi naman kailangan. So, yun. Sir, thank you so much. Sobrang thank you. As in, I've learned a lot. And, ang dami kong natutunan. As in, tapos, buti na lang, naging almost, hindi super bully. As in, almost talaga ako magiging bully. And thank you very much for reminding us na, dapat yung mga hinihate natin, hindi tayo maging ganon. Diba? Kasi madidefeat yung purpose na hinihate natin sila, tapos magiging ganon din tayo. So, yun. Sir, anong parting words mo para sa mga ka-uniques? Kahit gusto ka pa namin kausapin, Ecclesiastes, there is a time for everything, and halos time na natin to rest, which is hindi naman ako mag-rest kasi awal ako. Gising ako hanggang mamaya. Anong parting words mo sa mga ka-uniques, sir?
Well, first and foremost, in our time today, it's a messed up world, right? And there's so much polarization. I mean, we tend to feel that everybody else doesn't think as we do, and we look for people who think like us. And admittedly, it's very difficult to listen to people, especially when we think that they're wrong. But oftentimes, if we just take time to really listen to them and listen to their concerns, you'd realize they're not really that different from who we are. Maybe they see things differently and they think they would want to do it differently, but oftentimes in our heart of hearts, we all want more or less the same things, except that we may not agree on how we would achieve that. So I don't know. In our very violent and disorderly world today, I think we need to go back to trying to be friends with one another again. We've seen how many people have ended up unfriending people who they disagree with, at least politically. And I don't know, let's not add to the violence in our world. And maybe we should start listening to one another again, paying attention, and becoming friends again.
Yeah, listening to them even though we don't have the same beliefs kasi we will learn in every conversation.
Exactly.
Diba, sir?
If our hearts and our minds are open. But yeah, that requires that we should be at least very secure. Because when we are insecure, we want to cling to what we have because we think we will lose it. And if we listen to other people, especially if their ideas are different, and we are insecure, we are afraid to let go of that. But I don't know.
Sir, in connection, ang ganda ng sagot mo, sir. In connection naman to how to save the world na itong title natin. Anong parting
Mhm.
words mo? Kasi 'di ba, dun merong is it worth saving, ganyan, yung ang
Mhm.
dami mong tinakal kanina na yung sa iba it's meaningless, sa iba naman there's an
Mhm.
after life or after world, so bakit siya isi-save, ganun. Ikaw, sir, anong take mo doon? Anong
Okay.
parting words
This
mo?
reminds me of something that they often tell us when we ride planes. That if you're carrying a
Mm.
child with you and the pressure in the cabin gets lost,
Mm.
there will be these masks that will fall, okay, oxygen masks.
Mm.
But if you have a child with you, what you do is you put on your mask first before you put on the mask of the child. So what am I
Mm.
saying here? If you want to save the world, before you save the world, you have to save yourself first.
Ang ganda nun,
Sounds so
sir!
selfish.
Ang ganda nun. Before
Cheers.
you even save the world, you have to save yourself. Sabi mo, sound selfish? No, it's not. Kasi you can be of greater service to other people if ikaw mismo, you are cup full, as in you're overflowing, hindi ka lacking, hindi ka dun sa yung lack, yung sabi yung kanina? Basta yung kaya nag-aaway-away sa MRT, di ba? Dapat nasa
Mm-hmm.
abundance mentality tayo. Dapat nag-overflow tayo with
Mm-hmm.
love. Hindi tayo insecure. Kasi, if we don't take care of ourselves, ang nare-radiate din natin na aura is is a bad aura. It's a sad aura. It's a depressed aura.
Mm-hmm.
So, hindi din tayo of better service to other people. Kaya very good ka, sir, na
Mm-hmm.
sabi mong take care of yourself. Kasi when you take care of yourself, mas nakakatulong ka sa other people. Mas nakaka-inspire ka. Diba, sir? Like ako,
Yeah.
na-inspire ako dun sa ginawa mo, sir, na PowerPoint. For sure, ilang hours mo yung ginagawa. Nagkuha-kuha ka pa ng mga picture-picture.
Actually,
Diba?
days. It's not hours,
Days
it's
pala.
days.
Days pala, sorry. Days pala. Thank you very much sa
3 days
days
at
na
least.
3 days. Oh, days pala. So, thank you very much, Sir Christian, sa 3 days na yan. Kasi tayong ako and the 4 live watchers, we've learned a lot. Sabi pa nga ni,
I hope so.
sabi pa nga ni Ate Tatiana, we all see things differently. Acknowledging that we all live in one home, one earth, will make us realize that we are one family. When we see people as family, it is easier to decide, to choose love. Ang ganda.
Mm.
Tapos sabi pa niya, Jordan Peterson says, put your own house in order first. Tama.
Charity begins at home.
Tama. Mm-mm. Charity begins at home, and before ka mapunta sa home, you begin with yourself, which is yung self-care at saka self-love. Ganda, sir! Galing ng guesting mo!
Thank you.
I've learned a lot.
So we really went overtime.
Ganyan yan, yung tayo, di ba, nung Sun Life appointment tayo. Nung Sun Life kami, nireview ko siya, tapos nagpindag ko yung health program ni Sun Life, tapos in-invite ko siyang unique. Before ko siya na-invite na unique guest, nagkwentuhan kami about life, ganyan, kung ano-ano. Sabi ni Ate Tatiana, thank you for preparing for this. It was worth my almost 3 hours. Oo nga. It was worth it, sir. Sir, since
I
you
couldn't
have,
disappoint the audience.
nice. Ang galing. Galing. Sinabi pala yun, sir, mga kainik, sinabi pala yun ni sir kanina. Sabi niya, wow, sir, ang galing mo talaga. May PowerPoint presentation ka pa. Tapos sabi niya, I couldn't disappoint the audience. Ganun talaga yung agenda niya. So, sir, since you have power, you have influence, and I'm sure you're using your power for the right thing, I want you to plug bakit sila magla-like and subscribe sa Nick 1990. Coming from Sir Christian,
Well,
si Sir Christian, hindi mo siya mabubudol-budol lang. Sasabihin niya dahil paniniwala na yan. Ayan, sir.
well, as I said
So,
earlier, why should you subscribe to Unique's videos? Because she has a variety of guests with different perspectives, and you never know when any one of these particular people or particular guests that she invites might have something that might have a jewel, a hidden jewel that is just for you. So like and subscribe on her YouTube channel so that you can, you can be updated and find out just and discover that hidden jewel that is meant for you.
Ang ganda! Ang ganda! Very ano ka na, sir. Writer ka. Writer ka ba, sir? Nag-write ka, no? Writer ka?
Yeah.
Galing. This hidden jewel that is meant for you. O, di ba? Ganda. Ang ganda, sir. Sir, thank you very much for saying yes to be my unique guest. And sabi ko nga, you will be forever special para sa akin kasi ikaw ang very first college professor na guest ko. And hindi lang pala, sabi ko kanina, dalawa kasi sabi ko sa life client kita and very first unique guest na college professor. Pero actually, 4 pala yung nakuha ko sa'yo, sir. So, very first college professor as unique guest, and very first Sun Life client na college professor. And kasama pa pala kita sa unique support. Yung support group ko nga every first and third Saturday. And you are my friend, sir. Thank you very much for giving four persons in one Christian sa life ni Dominic Alvarez. And sir, if you've been watching my mga guesting, which is you did kasi nag-watch ka naman nung kay Vanya and kay Justin Guemo. Lagi kong sinasabi sa mga guest ko na you are #blessings. Ano yun, sir? If nag-watch ka ng mabuti.
Blessings is your portmanteau, which means you are your presence is a blessing.
Galing!
Blessings.
Ang very good talaga nitong guest natin. Ang very good mo, sir. Very good ka din palang student. Kaya pala very good kang teacher kasi very good kang student. So yun, thank you very much, sir. Ito na talaga yung totoong thank you very much. So I'll see you every first and third Saturday of the month, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And if you want to join us, mga Phoenix, just send me a private message para maging part kayo ng support group na no strings attached. Sobrang galing ni sir. I've learned a lot. Do you agree, mga Phoenix? You've learned a lot, diba? So let's do the peaceful way in saving the world. Non-violence. Okay? So thank you very much, sir. Bye. God bless. I'll see you offline.
Live long and prosper. This is from Star Trek.
Ito, sir.
It's a greeting, a Vulcan greeting. Live long and prosper.
Okay. Okay, live long and prosper. Okay. Okay, sir. Live long and prosper. Bye, sir. God bless. Thank you very much, mga Phoenix, for watching How to Save the World. Diba, nung in-invite ko kayo sa Facebook post ko, this is for Christians and non-Christians kasi hindi naman very religious yung diniscuss kasi as in for humanity siya. And ang galing-galing ni sir, na-amaze ako. Sobrang worth it yung, mali pa rin sinabi ko, sorry sir, sabi ko hours of preparing. Days pala, 3 days pala. Sobrang worth it, diba, mga Phoenix? So, yun, ano ba yung mga na-take off from Sir Christian? Sabi niya, mas may power ka if you can control your power. Yung pwede ka maging the Hulk na sobrang galit, makasuntok ka, ganyan. Di ba yung kanina, yung meron siyang gustong islap na student, pero ang ginawa niya is nilagay niya yung hand niya on the table at doon nanginginig yung hand niya sobrang galit. And sabi niya, parang anong sabi niya? Ay, nahalo-halo ko na. Basta may sinabi siya dun sa isang student na, look what you've done. Parang gano'n. Hindi siya naging destructive. Kasi alam mo, mga Phoenix, sobrang galit nyo, you can do something and that something cannot be undone anymore. So, dapat matuto tayo ng self-control. So, ano yung natutunan natin? Ano ba? Natutunan natin na the myth of redemptive violence na violence versus violence is really just a myth. So, wag tayo magpasway sa pinapakita sa media na in order to have peace, violence over violence. That's wrong. Kasi in order to have peace, we stop it. magsa-stop tayo. Gagawin natin siyang peaceful way and just watch this on replay para makita ano yung mga many peaceful ways to stop, to get rid, to stop / get rid of violence. So, yun. And, yung pinaka-favorite ko, talaga nakatingin pa nga, tapos may pa-end pa ganyan. Do not be like the person you hate, mga kainix. Do not be like the person you hate. So, I wanna apologize again sa mga pinatulan kong bullies when I was 19 years old. If you know that story, sorry again. Tao lang na nagalit. Nagalit din. Okay, so i-plug natin. I've learned my lesson na sabi nga ni Ate Tatiana. Sabi niya dito, yung hindi ko na makita. Yung dun sa yung forgive them for they do not know what they're doing. Tapos sabi ko, actually, I know what I'm doing. Pero sabi niya, you don't know the extent nung anger ko. Ito, do not know what you are doing mean that you do not fully understand the full extent of your anger. Yun nga. So yun, sorry ulit mga mix. I wasn't a good example when I was 19. Kasi grabe grade 4 to high school akong binubully. So, yun. Asan na tayo? Okay. So, mega love shoutout to 5 million watchers. So, ipa-plug ko na yung mga next natin na unique guests. So, on April 7, Wednesday, every Wednesday na, starting this April, mga Kinix, every Wednesday night ng 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. na ang aking singdaldalan. Wednesday, April 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Singdaldalan with Sales Manager Alexon Esteban. And on April 9, which is the Day of Valor, April 9, Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., we will have our very first bodybuilder guest, si Miss Shirley. So April 9, 7 p.m. April 9, Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. April 14, Wednesday, we will have Singdaldalan with my YouTube mentor, Anne Abigail Saavedra. April 14, Wednesday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. April 16, we will have our super active and participative unique watcher ngayon. Magiging unique guest ulit si Ate Tatiana, si Real Alvarez Castro. On April 16, Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And nagbabalik si MJ Fribaldos on April 28, Wednesday. This is MJ's third guesting sa Singdaldalan. April 28, Wednesday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. But wait, there's more. Hindi pa pala tapos. Meron pa akong guest. April 30, kasama siya yung pinaka-first na participant ng unique support, si Ate Jessica Cruz, April 30, Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. So, meron pa akong slot for April 21, Wednesday, for Singdaldalan. If mga Kinix gusto nyo mag-sing sa aking YouTube channel, just private message me at nick1990. And on April 23, Friday, free pa yung slot ko for unique interviews. So again, our new schedule starting April is every Wednesday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for Singdaldalan. Formerly every Monday yun. And stick tayo sa schedule natin na every Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. for unique interviews. So, if you got informed, inspired, or entertained, don't forget to like, subscribe, at mag-comment ka naman dyan, mga Kinix, ng unique inspiration that you got from this live streaming, this unique interviews na how to save the world. And mag-comment ka dyan ng mga suggestion mo din na kakantahin na bagay sa unique voice ko for my Singdaldalan. And mag-comment ka or mag-private message ka sa akin if you want to be my next unique guest. So, I'll see you on my next live streaming and my next vlogs. Yung vlogs ko, hindi na siya super regular na weekly kasi marami pa akong ina-ice mga bagay-bagay. So, I'll just upload vlogs whenever I want to. Pero, yung unique interviews and Singdaldalan, twice a week. So, regular yon. So, I'll see you on my next live streaming and my next vlogs. Bye! God bless!